Poems by Helen Maria Williams. In 2 volumes. Volume 1, Mflkexvi. To Her Majesty. Madam, I am too sensible of the distinguished honor conferred upon me, in your Majesty's gracious protection of these poems, to abuse it by adopting the common strain of dedication. That praise corresponds best to your Majesty's generous feelings, which is poured without restraint from the heart, and is repeated where you cannot hear. I suppress, therefore, in delicacy to those feelings, the warmth of my own, and subscribe myself, Madam, with profound respect, your Majesty's devoted servant, Helen Maria Williams. Preface. The apprehension which it becomes me to feel, in submitting these poems to the judgment of the public, may perhaps plead my excuse, for detaining the reader to relate, that they were written under the disadvantages of a confined education, and at an age too young for the attainment of an accurate taste. My first production, the legendary tale of Edwin and Eltruda, was composed to amuse some solitary hours, and without any view to publication. Being shown to Dr. Kippis, he declared that it deserved to be committed to the press, and offered to take upon himself the task of introducing it to the world. I could not hesitate to publish a composition which had received the sanction of his approbation. By the favorable reception this little poem met with, I was encouraged still farther to meet the public eye in the Ode on the Peace, and the poem which has the title of Peru. These poems are inserted in the present collection, but not exactly in their original form. I have felt it my duty to exert my endeavors in such a revision and improvement of them, as may render them somewhat more worthy of perusal. It will, I am afraid, still be found that there are several things in them which would shrink at the approach of severe criticism. The other poems that now for the first time appear in print are offered with a degree of humility rather increased than diminished, by the powerful patronage with which they have been honored, in consequence of the character given of them by partial friends. Knowing how strongly affection can influence opinion, the kindness which excites my warmest gratitude has not inspired me with confidence. When I survey such an evidence of the zeal of my friends to serve me, as the following honorable and extensive list affords, I have cause for exultation in having published this work by subscription. They who know my disposition will readily believe that the tear which fills my eye, while I thank them for their generous exertions, flows not from the consideration of the benefits that have arisen from their friendship. It is to that friendship itself that my heart pays a tribute of affection which I will not attempt to express, for my pen is unfaithful to my purpose. While I am employed in testifying my thankfulness for the favors I have received, it is impossible that I should forget how much I owe to one gentleman in particular, whose exertions in my behalf, though I was a stranger to him, have been so marked, so generous, and indeed so unexampled, that it is a very painful task which his delicacy has imposed upon me, in not permitting me to mention his name. But such goodness cannot be concealed. The gratitude of my own heart has proclaimed it to my private friends, and the noble and honorable subscribers his zeal has procured, cannot avoid being sensible to whom I am indebted for so illustrious a patronage. List of subscribers. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. A. Her Grace the Duchess of Ancaster. The Right Hon. The Earl of Abingdon. The Right Hon. The Dowager Countess of Albemarle. The Right Hon. The Earl of Aylesford, Captain of the Yeomen of the Guards. The Right Hon. The Earl of Ashburnham. The Right Hon. The Earl of Aylesbury, Lord Chamberlain of Her Majesty's household. The Right Rev. the Bishop of St. Asaph. The Right Hon. Lord Amherst, a general in the army, colonel of the 2nd Troop of Horse Guards, and governor of the Isle of Guernsey. The Right Hon. Lady Amherst. The Right Hon. Lord Apsley, a Lord of the Admiralty. The Right Hon. Lord Arden, a Lord of the Admiralty. Sir Edmund Anderson, Bart. Sir Edmund Affleck, Bart. Rear Admiral of the Blue. Lady Affleck. The Hon. Richard Pepper Arden, Esq. His Majesty's Attorney General, and Chief Justice of Chester. Charles Ambler, Esq. King's Counsel, and Her Majesty's Attorney General. William Adair, Esq. Barrister at Law. William Adam, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. Adam. Adair, Esq. Thomas Adams, Esq. Alnwick. Robert Adair, Esq. Mrs. A. Affleck. Miss Affleck Berry. Rev. Mr. James Atchison, Berwick. Mrs. Alder, Horncliffe. William Alexander, Esq. Alexander Allison, Esq. Miss Allen, Berwick. Robert Allen, Esq. Edinburgh. Mrs. Allen. The Rev. Nathaniel Andrews, Warminster, Wilts. Miss Anderson. Francis Annesley, Esq. John Anstruther, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. J. Anstruther. James Arbuin, Esq. Robert Arbuthnot, Esq. Secretary to the Board of Trustees, Edinburgh. Mrs. Arden. The Rev. Mr. Arden, Vicar of Tarpally in Cheshire. H. G. Armory, Esq. The Rev. Mr. Armstrong, Bath. George Arnold, Esq. Mrs. Arnold. Miss Artaud. Late Mrs. Ashurst, St. Julian's. John Askew, Esq. Pallinsburn. Mrs. Askew ditto. Miss A. Askew ditto. Mr. G. A. Askew Eaton. Mrs. Askew, Redhugh Durham. Miss Askew. Francis Austin, Esq. Mrs. Austin. The Rev. Mr. S. Austin. Mrs. Sackville Austin. Mrs. Axford. Theodore Aylward, Esq. Musical Professor at Gresham College. B. Her Grace the Duchess of Bolton. His Grace the Duke of Buccleuch, Governor of the Royal Bank of Scotland. Her Grace the Duchess of Buccleuch. The Right Hon. The Marquis of Buckingham, Lord Lieutenant of the County of Bucks, and one of His Majesty's Privy Council. The Right Hon. The Marchioness of Buckingham. The Right Hon. The Earl of Buckinghamshire, one of His Majesty's Privy Council. The Right Hon. The Countess of Buckinghamshire. The Right Hon. The Earl of Beaulieu. The Right Hon. Lady Diana Beauclerc. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Bath and Wells. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Bangor. The Right Hon. Lord Boston, a Lord of the Bedchamber. The Right Hon. Lord Brownlow. The Right Hon. Lady Brownlow. The Right Hon. Lord Brudenell, Master of the Robes. The Right Hon. Lady Caroline Bruce. The Right Hon. Lady Frances Bruce. The Hon. Mrs. Bailey Edinburgh. The Hon. Henry Burton. The Hon. Mrs. Boscawen. The Hon. Miss Boscawen, Maid of Honour to the Queen. Sir Edward Bacon, Premier Baronet of England. Lady Bacon. Lady Blake. Sir Harry Berard Bart. Lady Blunt. The Rev. Nicholas Bacon, Codenham. Robert Bailey, Esq. Carfin, Fife. Matthew Bailey, Esq. Miss Bailey. Miss J. Bailey. Mrs. Balcanquel Cooper, Fife. James Balma, Esq. Commissioner of Excise, Edinburgh. Miss Caroline Balma. Mr. James Banfield. Dougal Bannatyne, Esq. William Barclay, Esq. Captain Barclay, Play Hatch, Berks. Mrs. Barclay. Edward Barnard, Esq. Mrs. Barnewin. Miss Barnewin, Southampton. The Rev. William Barrow, LL.D. Miss Caroline Barlow, Winton. Miss Barry. Miss Barton. Barton, Esq. Mrs. Barwell. The Rev. Dr. Bates. Mrs. Bates. Joa Bates, Esq. Commissioner of the Customs. Mrs. J. Bates. Miss Batten, Yeovil, Somersetshire. John Bax, Esq. Fowell Baxton, Esq. William Baines, Esq. Mrs. Baines. Dr. Bailey, Chichester. Miss Bailey, Colchester. Matthew Beechcroft, Esq. Mrs. Beechwell. Edward Bearcroft, Esq. Miss Bearcroft. Mrs. Beasley. Henry Beaufoy, Esq. Mrs. Beaufoy. Mr. Beaumont. Mr. Robert Beggar, June Sheens, Edinburgh. Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Belson. John Bicknell, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. Bicknell. Charles Bicknell, Esq. Mrs. Bicknell. Mrs. Billingsley, Edinburgh. Mrs. Billingsley of Ashwick Grove, Somersetshire. Miss Billingsley. John Bill, Esq. Totteridge. The Rev. Mr. Birch. Thomas Birch, Esq. Bird, Esq. Mrs. Bisson. Miss Bisson. Mr. Blackbourne. Mrs. Blagney. Miss Blake, Crewkerne, Somersetshire. John Bonner, Esq. Excise Office, Edinburgh. Alexander Bonner, Esq. Edinburgh. Andrew Bonner, Esq. Ditto. Mr. Charles Bond, St. John's College, Cambridge. Phineas Bond, Esq. Barrister at Law. Book Society, St. Albans. Frederick Booth, Esq. Wilbraham Boodle, Esq. Mrs. Boodle. Miss Borthwick, Colchester. Jacob Bosanquet, Esq. William Bosanquet, Esq. Henry Bosanquet, Esq. Mrs. Bosanquet. Miss Bosanquet. William Boscawen, Esq. Barrister at Law, and a Commissioner of the Victualling Office. James Boscott, Esq. Mrs. Boscott. Captain Boteler, Henley. Mrs. Bott. The Rev. Jonathan Boucher, Epsom. Miss Boucher, Yeovil, Somersetshire. The Rev. Mr. Bouts. John Bodler, Esq. Charles Bowler, Esq. Lymington, Hants. The Rev. Mr. Bonus. Joseph Boyce, Esq. Boyer, Esq. Miss Boys, Sherburne, Dorset. Miss Brackenbury. Miss Bradford, French Hay, Gloucestershire. Barrington Bradshaw, Esq. Mrs. Bradshaw. Mr. Bradstreet, St. John's College, Cambridge. Daniel Braithwaite, Esq. Mr. Brand. Mrs. Brand. Miss Bray. Mrs. Bruce, Ipswich. Bridger, Esq. Miss Bridger. Mrs. Britt. Thomas H. Broadhead, Esq. Mrs. Brockhurst. Mrs. Brome, Ipswich. William Bromfield, Esq. James Bromfield, Esq. Stamp Brooksbanks, Esq. Commissioner of Excise. Mrs. Brooksbanks. W. C. Brough, Esq. Jobs C. Brough, Esq. Barrister at Law. Brian Broughton, Esq. George Brown, Esq. Charles Brown, Esq. Edinburgh. Isaac Hawkins Brown, Esq. William Brown, Esq. Alexander Brown, Esq. Librarian to the Faculty of Advocates, Edinburgh. Miss Brown, Stockton, Durham. Miss Brunette. Edward Bruce, Esq. Edinburgh. Mr. James Bruce, ditto. Mr. John Bruce, Professor of Logic, Edinburgh. Frederick Bruce, Esq. Edinburgh. Bryant, Esq. Mrs. Bryern. John Buchan, Esq. Writer to the Signet, Edinburgh. Charles Birchier, Esq. Mr. Bug, Belford. Mrs. Bull. Bull, Esq. Wilton. Buller, Esq. ditto. Mr. Joseph Bullen. Mrs. Buncombe, Bishop's Hall, Somerset. Miss Buncombe, Hornby, Somerset. Mr. J. S. Burford. Miss Burford, Chigwell. Thomas Berg, Esq. J. C. Berg, Esq. George Byrne, Esq. Harry Berard, Esq. Lymington. Mrs. Butler, Yeovil, Somerset. Edward Butler, Esq. June Warminster. Mrs. de Butts. C. His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Right Hon. Lord Camden, President of the Council. The Right Hon. The Marquis of Carmarthen, one of His Majesty's principal Secretaries of State. The Right Hon. The Earl of Cork. The Right Hon. The Earl of Clarendon, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. The Dowager Countess of Cavan. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Carlisle. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Chester. The Right Hon. Lord Cadogan. The Right Hon. Lord Camelford. The Right Hon. Lady Camelford. The Right Hon. Lord Shedworth. The Hon. Mrs. Cornwallis. Sir James Campbell, Bart. Lady Campbell, Madras. Sir George Cornwall, Bart. Lady Cornwall. Sir Thomas Clavering, Bart. Ailey Campbell, Esq. Lord Advocate of Scotland. Cabonnet, Esq. Philip Cade, Esq. Mrs. P. Cade. Miss Cadogan. Mrs. Keogh. Colonel Campbell, Monsey. Lieutenant Colonel Campbell, Madras. Mrs. Campbell. Mr. Archibald Campbell. Miss Campbell. William Campbell, Esq. Fairfield. John Campbell, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Campbell. Captain R. N. Campbell. Miss Campbell, Edinburgh. Miss Campion, Colchester. Mrs. Capados. Carbonell, Esq. Mrs. Carbonell. Peter Carlett, June, Esq. Mrs. Reginald P. Carew. Mrs. Cark. Mr. James Carmichael, Eyemouth. John Carr, Esq. Rishope. Mrs. Carter. Edward Castance, Esq. Mrs. Castance. Mr. John Chadwick. H. Chambers, Esq. Miss Chapman. Miss Chapman, South Petherton, Somerset. Edward Charlton, Esq. Reed's Mouth. Mr. William Charlton, Alnwick. Miss Chartres, Ednam House. Robert Chester, Esq. Mrs. Chester. Miss Chester. Miss Cheveley. Joseph Chew, Esq. Miss Child. Chown, Esq. Mrs. Chown. Miss Chown. Alexander Christie, Esq. Groldykes. James Christie, Esq. Mrs. Christie. Miss Christie. James Christie, June, Esq. Mrs. Clark, Orthouse, Berwick. Richard Clark, Esq. Thomas Clark, Esq. Mrs. Clark. Richard Clark, Esq. Miss Clark. Miss Clark of Exeter. The Rev. Mr. Clarkson, Kirkhill. Charles Clavering, Esq. Miss Clavering, Barrington. William Clay, Esq. Mrs. Margaret Clayton. Miss Clayton. Miss K. Clavering, ditto. Miss Cleaver. The late Mrs. Clive. Miss E. Clutterbuck, Clonmel, Ireland. John Clooney, Esq. Berwick. William Coates, Esq. Bristol. Thomas Coates, Esq. ditto. Richard Cochrane, Esq. Miss Coles. Collett, Esq. the Rev. S. Collinson, Oxford. College Library, Edinburgh. Miss Colquhoun, Edinburgh. Henry Compton, Esq. Robert Comins, Esq. Barrister at Law. Lancelot Coningham, Esq. Winchester. William Cooper, Esq. John Core, Esq. Mrs. Core. The Rev. Dr. Cooper, Prebendary of Durham. Mrs. Cooper. Mrs. Casa. Miss Casa. Richard Causeway, Esq. Mrs. Causeway. Mr. Cotton. Robert Cotton, Esq. Thomas Tryon Cotton, Esq. Mr. J. Cotton, Chigwell, Essex. Miss Cotton. John Cotton, Esq. Richmond. John Cottrell, Esq. John Cornwall, Esq. Mrs. Cornwall. Miss Corbett, St. Albans. Thomas Coutts, Esq. Cooper, Esq. Thomas Cooper, Esq. King's Counsel. Mrs. T. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, Norwich. The Rev. Mr. Cooper. Mrs. Cox. Lieutenant Colonel Craig. Craig, Esq. John Cranford, Esq. Miss Crawford, Chiswick. Charles Alexander Cricket, Esq. Thomas Croft, Esq. Mrs. Crofts. George Crow, Esq. Netherbyers. Mr. Thomas Cruikshank. Mrs. Cumberland. Alexander Cunningham, Esq. Colonel Cunningham, Berwick. Miss Kerr. William Courteous, Esq. D. His Grace the Duke of Devonshire. Her Grace the Duchess of Devonshire. The Right Hon. The Earl of Dumfries. The Right Hon. Lady Viscountess Duncannon. The Right Rev. the Bishop of St. David's. The late Lord Dacre. The Dowager Lady Dacre. The Right Hon. Lady Harriet Diohan. The Right Hon. Lady Helen Douglas. Lord Dunsinane, one of the Senators of the College of Justice. The Hon. George Damer. The Hon. Mrs. Davy. Lady Don. Sir John D'Oyly Bart. Mrs. Dalgliesh, Edinburgh. Robert Dallas, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mr. Dalzell, Professor of Greek, Edinburgh. Mrs. Daniel Yeovil, Somerset. Harry Darby, Esq. Grange Hill, Essex. Miss Darby, Walhampton, Hants. Mr. John Darby, Hatfield, Hearts. Mr. Edmund Darby. Lionel Darrell, Esq. A Director of the East India Company. Robert Darrell, Esq. The Rev. Dr. Davis, Upper Master of Eton's School. Davison, Esq. Miss Davison, Berwick. Eleazar Davy, Esq. James Dawkins, Esq. George Dawkins, Esq. Mrs. Dawkins. John Dawson, Esq. William Day, Esq. Anthony Dean, June, Esq. Mrs. Dean. Miss Steele Trylon-Ridge. Joseph de Beaufort, Esq. Richard de Beaufort, Esq. Miss Maria de Berg, Southampton. Miss Deering Ripon. John de Gruchy, Esq. John Delamain, Esq. Mrs. Demham, Chigwell, Essex. George Dempster, Esq. Secretary to the Order of the Thistle. Mrs. Dempster. John Hamilton Dempster, a captain in the naval service of the East India Company. Mrs. J. H. Dempster. Major Dennis. Mrs. and Dennis. Mrs. Derby, Bridgewater, Somersetshire. Edward Desborough, Esq. Miss de Champs. William Devanes, Esq. Chairman of the East India Company. Cord Dews, Esq. Wellesbourne, Warwickshire. Barnard Dews, Esq. Hagley, Worcestershire. Mrs. Dixon, Ednam House. Mrs. Dixon. Miss Dixon, Taunton, Somerset. Miss Dixon. Miss Dixon. Captain Mark Dickens. Rev. Dr. Dickens, Archdeacon of Durham. Mr. William Dick Dunce. The Rev. Dr. Digby, Dean of Durham. Mrs. Digby. The Rev. Dr. Disney, Chelsea. Michael Dobson, Esq. Miss Dobson, Hackney. Mr. George Dominicus. Sylvester Douglas, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Douglas, Springwood Park. Mrs. Douglas. Mrs. Douglas. Miss Douglas. Archibald Douglas, Esq. Cavers. Miss M. Douglas. Captain Douglas, Berwick. Mrs. Douglas, Edinburgh. Mrs. Douglas, Cavers. Mrs. D'Oyley, St. Albans. George Drake, Esq. Mrs. Drake. Charles Druce, Esq. Drury, June, Esq. Colonel Drummond, of the Royal Regiment of Artillery. Captain Duddingston. The Rev. Dr. Dumoresque, Yeovilton, Somerset. William Dunbar, Esq. Miss Dunn. Alexander Duncan, Southport. Francis Durer, Esq. Colonel Durer. Miss Duttons. Miss Dutton. The Rev. Dr. Duval, Canon of Windsor, Treasurer and Secretary to His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester. E. The Right Hon. The Earl of Effingham, Master of the Mint. The Right Hon. The Earl of Egremont. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Ely. The Hon. Thomas Erskine, King's Counsel, and Attorney General to the Prince of Wales. The Hon. Mrs. T. Erskine. The Hon. Andrew Erskine. Mrs. Ede. Henry Earl, Esq. Mrs. K. Edgar Ipswich. Mrs. Edmiston Berwick. Miss Elizabeth Edmiston Berwick. Edmonds, Esq. Mrs. Edmonds. The Rev. Mr. Archdeacon Edwards. The Rev. Mr. Archdeacon Edgerton. The Rev. Mr. Charles Edgerton. Frederick Ekins, Esq. Winchester. John Elill, Esq. Totteridge. Luther Elliot, Esq. Colchester. Miss Elliot ditto. The Rev. Dr. Elliston, Master of Sidney College, Cambridge. Mrs. Elliston. William Eames, Esq. Miss Eames. Mrs. Emlyn. Mrs. Emmett. Mrs. Errington. George Ernest, Esq. Miss Ernest. James S. Dale, Esq. Mrs. Estlin, Bristol. Samuel Estwick, Esq. Deputy Paymaster of the Forces. Colonel Etherington, Jamaica. Major Etherington. Rev. Caleb Evans, Bristol. Miss Evans, ditto. Mrs. Evans, ditto. Miss Evans. Miss Evans. Miss M. Evans. John of Earth, Esq. Thomas Evans, Esq. Evans, Esq. John Ewer, Esq. Miss Ewer. Mrs. A. Ayres. F. The Right Hon. Earl Fitzwilliam. The Right Hon. Lord Fortescue. The Right Hon. Lady Charlotte Finch. The Hon. John Fitzwilliam, a general in the army, and colonel of the 2nd Regiment of Horse. The Hon. Mr. Fitzwilliam. George Fairholme, Esq. Colin Falconer, Esq. Woodley Park. Miss M. C. Fanshawe. The Rev. Hugh Farmer, Walthamstow. The Rev. Dr. Farmer. William Farquharson, Esq. Edinburgh. Mr. Farquhar. Miss Charlotte Faulkner. William Falconer, Esq. Clerk of the Council. Mrs. Falconer. James Ferguson, Esq. of Balfour. James Ferguson, Esq. of Edinburgh. Neil Ferguson, Esq. Edinburgh. Mrs. Ferguson, ditto. Miss Ferguson, ditto. Miss Ferrers, Chigwell, Essex. Thomas Ferrers, Esq. The Rev. Edmund Ferrers. The Rev. J. Bromfield Ferrers. Henry Festing, Esq. Miss Fielding. Miss Fig Berwick. Miss Finch. John Fayette, Esq. Totteridge. Mrs. Fayette. Captain Edward Fayette, Jersey. Miss Furman, Ipswich. John Fisher, Esq. Mrs. Fisher. Thomas Fitzhugh, Esq. John Floud, Esq. Mrs. H. Faunereau, Colchester. John Foote, Esq. Jesse Foote, Esq. John Foote, Esq. Firstine, Esq. The Rev. Dr. Forster, Colchester. The Rev. Mr. Foster, Liverpool. Mrs. R. Forrester, Berwick. Miss M. W. Forster, Berwick. Miss Ford. Mrs. Frankland, Chichester. Clement Francis, Esq. John Frere, Esq. F. R. S. and F. A.S. William French, Esq. Mrs. Frogat. Miss Froude, Matcombe, Dorset. Mrs. Fury. G. Her Grace the Duchess of Grafton. The Right Hon. The Earl of Guilford. The Right Hon. Lord Grantham. The Hon. Mrs. L. Gower. The Hon. Baron Gordon. Sir Thomas Gooch, Bart. Lady Gooch. Sir Charles Grey. Lady Grey. Mrs. Gardner. Henry Galley, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Galdi. Mrs. Gardiner. Mrs. Gardiner. Major Gardner. Mrs. Gardiner. Mrs. Garrick. The Rev. R. E. Garnham, Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. Miss Henrietta Gaviller. Philip Gavey, Esq. Gauder, Esq. Sherburn, Dorsetshire. Samuel Gowson, Esq. Mrs. Gowson. Miss Gowson. Mrs. Gell, Hopton, Derbyshire. Captain Gell, of the Navy. G. Chapman George, Esq. Miss Gibson, Hackney. Mrs. M. Girardoles, Putney. Robert Glynn, Esq. M. D. Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, and of King's College, Cambridge. Stephen Peter Godin, Esq. Cullard's Grove, Middlesex. Mrs. Godin, Hampton, Middlesex. Mrs. Goddard. William Godfrey, Esq. Godfrey, Esq. The Rev. Mr. John Gooch. Mrs. Hester Goodera. Mrs. Goodfellow. Mrs. Goodford Yeovil, Somerset. Mrs. Gossett. Miss Goff. Colonel Gould. Mrs. Gould, of Colchester. Robert Graham, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Graham, Berwick. The Rev. Mr. John Granville, Cowich, Staffordshire. Greystock, Esq. Mrs. Gray, Colchester. Miss Gray, Edinburgh. Thomas Gray, Esq. of the 14th Regiment. Augustine Greenland, Esq. Mrs. Greenland. Miss Greenland. General Green. Mrs. Gray Fallsdon. Miss Gray ditto. Francis Gregg, June, Esq. Anthony Gregson, Esq. Lonlin. Mrs. Gregson Precton. Mrs. Grieve Berwick. Mark Gregory, Esq. Thomas Gregory, Esq. The Rev. George Gregory. Mrs. Green. Philip Gretton, Esq. Colchester. The Rev. B. Grisdale. Mrs. Groot. William Grove, Esq. William Grove, Esq. of Lichfield. Miss Gordon, Colchester. Miss Guy. William Guy, Esq. Colchester. Mrs. Gwatham. H. His Grace the Duke of Hamilton. Her Grace the Duchess of Hamilton. The Right Hon. The Earl of Hopetown, one of the 16 peers of Scotland. The Right Hon. The Countess of Hopetown. The Right Hon. Lord Howard de Walden, a general of His Majesty's forces, and colonel of the 1st Troop of Horse Grenadier Guards. The Right Hon. Lady Howard de Walden. The Right Hon. Lord Harrowby. The Right Hon. Lady Harrowby. The Hon. Miss Hamilton. The Hon. Mrs. Hanbury. Sir John Henderson Bart. Sir James Hall Bart. Sir Andrew Snape Hammond Bart. Lady Haggerston. George Hardinge, Esq.F. A.S., King's Counsel, and Solicitor General to the Queen. Mrs. G. Hardinge. Mrs. Hayden. Mrs. Haggerston, Ellingham. Miss Haggerston. Thomas Haggerston, Esq. Sandak. Mrs. E. Hastewell. The Rev. Mr. Halters, Wimbledon. Miss Hawkerston. Mrs. Hall. Miss Hall, Edinburgh. Mrs. Hall. Rev. Mr. Halls, Colchester. William Hall, Esq. Mrs. Halliday, Taunton, Somerset. Miss Halliday ditto. Mr. Halliwell. John James Hamilton, Esq. Colonel Hamilton, Dabriel. William Hamilton, Esq. Mrs. W. Hamilton. Miss Hamilton. Rev. Dr. Hamilton, Archdeacon of Colchester, and Vicar of St. Martin's in the Fields, FRS and FAS. Miss Hanbury. Miss F. Hanbury. Miss E. Hankel. Miss M. Hannay. Mrs. Hardinge. Miss Hardinge. Miss Julia Hardinge. George Hardinge, June. Esq. The Rev. Mr. Hardinge, Vicar of Kingston upon Thames. Richard Hardinge, Esq. Captain of the Kent East Indiaman. Miss Harford. Francis Hargrave, June. Esq. Mrs. Hargrave. Robert Harper, Esq. The Rev. Mr. Harper. Thomas Harris, Esq. Knightsbridge. The Rev. A. Harris, Maidstone, Kent. R. Harris, Esq. ditto. John Harrison, Esq. Miss Harrison. Mr. William Harrison, Devon. The Rev. George Harvey, Sherburne, Dorset. Warren Hastings, Esq. Mrs. Hastings. Miss N. Hastings, Sussex. Miss Hawes. Miss Maria Hawes. Mrs. Hawksworth, Bromley. Miss Hayward, Shid Lane. William Haley, Esq. Eartham, Sussex. Mrs. Haley. Mrs. Harcup. Dr. Heberden, M.D. Mr. Heckles. The late Rev. Mr. Hemmings, minister of the chapel at Twickenham. Mrs. Hemmings. Robert Henderson, Esq. Edinburgh. Robert Henderson, Esq. Colonel David Hepburn. Miss Herbert. Mrs. Hewitt Colchester. Higden, Esq. Mr. Hill, Professor of Humanity, Edinburgh. Miss Hill. Mrs. Hill. The Rev. Mr. Hill. Miss Hill. R. M. Hills, Esq. Colchester. Mrs. Hodgson. Miss Hoffman. Mr. G. Hogarth, Lennell Hill, James Hogbin, Esq. Mrs. Holden. Robert Holder, Esq. John Holliday, Esq. Mrs. Holman. Holman, Esq. Mrs. Hood. John Hoole, Esq. Mrs. Hoole. The Rev. Mr. J. Hoole. B. Bond Hopkins, Esq. Wimbledon. Dr. John Hope, Professor of Botany, Edinburgh. T. Hopkins, Esq. William Hornby, Esq. Mrs. Hornby. Mrs. Hublin. Dr. Holston, Liverpool. Mr. Holston. Miss Howell, of Yeovil, Somerset. Miss Hughes, Berwick. Henry Hughes, Esq. Hume, Esq. David Hume, Esq. Edinburgh. Mrs. Hume. Mrs. Hunter. Mrs. John Hunter. Joseph Herlock, Esq. The Rev. Mr. Hutchison, Suffolk. Miss Hutchison, Putney. The Rev. Mr. Hudson. E.H. J. Sir William Jerningham, Bart. Miss Jackson, Nicholas Field, Kelso. Henry Jackson, Esq. Thomas Scott Jackson, Esq. Mrs. T. S. Jackson. Charles Jackson, June, Esq. Miss Jackson. William Jameson, Esq. Mrs. Jameson. Mr. Jameson, Haggerston. Gilbert James, Esq. Stowe. Miss James, East Hart Try, Somerset. Mrs. Mary Jeffreys. Miss M. Jeffreys. John Jeffreys, Esq. John Jeffreys, Esq. Berwick. William Jeffreys, Esq. Ditto. Edward Jeffreys, Esq. Treasurer of St. Thomas's Hospital. Jeffreys, Esq. Sherburne, Dorset. Joseph Jekyll, Esq. Barrister at Law. Robert Jenner, Esq. Mrs. Jenner. Edward Jerningham, Esq. Gervais Clark Gervais, Esq. The Rev. T. Jerwis. Mrs. Jesser Hackney. Miss Gillard, Bishop Hall, Somerset. Hugh Inglis, Esq. Mrs. Inglis. Hugh Inglis, Esq. Mr. Robert Ingram, Sydney College, Cambridge. Mrs. Ingram, Mrs. Ingram. William Innes, Esq. Miss Johns 1. Miffs Johnson, Bromley. Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Jones. William Jones, Esq. Mrs. Jones. Mr. Jones. Daniel Jones, Esq. Mrs. D. Jones. Valentine Jones, Esq. Miss Jones. John Johnson, Esq. T. Jordan, Esq. Jordan, Esq. Mrs. Jordan, Oak Hill, Somerset. Miss Joliet. Mrs. Jupp. K. Lady Kent. George Keat, Esq. Miss Keene. Edmund Kelly, Esq. Kelso Library. John Kemble, Esq. Miss Kemble. J. W. Kendall, Esq. Miss Kennesley. Cranmer Kenrick, Esq. Southgate, Middlesex. Mrs. Kerr. Mr. William Kerr, Cornhill. The Rev. Mr. Kesterman, Christ College, Cambridge. Miss Kesterman, Colchester. Miss Mary Kesterman, ditto. William Keymer, Esq. Miss Kidney, Nuston Hall, Northampton. James King, Esq. Mrs. E. King. Shaw King, Esq. Colchester. Miss Kinloch, Gilmerton. John Kingsman, Esq. The Rev. Dr. Kippies. Mrs. Kippies. John Kirkpatrick, Esq. Mrs. Knapp. E. Knight, Esq. Samuel Knight, Esq. Mrs. Knight. John Nill, Esq. L. The Right Hon. The Earl of Leicester, Captain of the Band of Pensioners, President of the Antiquarian Society, and F.R.S. the Right Hon. The Countess of Leicester. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Lichfield and Coventry. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Llandaff. The Right Hon. Lady Charlotte Legge. Sir William Lorraine Bart. Lady Lorraine. Mrs. Labarte, Clonmel, Ireland. A Lady. Moulton Lambard, Esq. The Rev. Thomas Lambard, Vicar of Ash in Kent. Mrs. F. Lambard. Mrs. Lambert. Mrs. Landell Settle. Thomas Langley, Esq. Landseer, Esq. John Lane, Esq. Mrs. Lane. Miss E. Lane. The Rev. Mr. Lane. Miss Larpent. Miss F. Larpent. The Rev. Mr. Law, Preb. Of Carlisle. Mrs. Laws, Polton House, Wilts. Mrs. Allen Lawrence. French Lawrence, Esq. Lawrence, Esq. Herbert Lawrence, Esq. The Rev. C. P. Layard, FRSFAS. Mrs. Layard. Mrs. Leighton Weymouth. Mrs. Leather. Mrs. Lee of Totteridge Park. Miss Lee. Miss Louisa Lee. Harmon Leese, Esq. William N. Leaves, Esq. Taunton, Sussex. Hugh Lester, Esq. Barrister at Law. Rev. John Lettuce, Pursemarsh, Sussex. Robert Lewin, Esq. S. Lewin, Esq. Hackney. C. Lewis, Esq. T. Lewis, Esq. Mrs. Lewis. Miss Lewis. R. Lewis, Esq. Colchester. Rev. Mr. Lindsay. Mr. James Lynn, Gosport. Livingstone, Esq. Colonel Livingstone, Edinburgh. Mr. F. Lloyd. Lloyd, Esq. William Locke, Esq. Mrs. Locke. Mrs. Lockwood. George Logan, Esq. Ednam. Lomax, Esq. Mr. William Long. Mrs. Robert Long. Thomas Longlands, Esq. Mrs. Lozak. Miss Lozak. Captain George Lozak of the Navy. Mrs. Love. Mr. John Lodell. J. D. Lucadon, Esq. Miss Lucas. Mrs. Ludbay. Rev. Dr. Lullerton. Rev. William Lush, Warminster, Wilts. Lutley, Esq. Henry Lyell, Esq. Mrs. Lyell. Rev. Mr. Daniel Lysons. Samuel Lysons, Esq. Miss G. L. His Grace the Duke of Montague, Master of the Horse to the King. The Right Hon. Lord Milton. The Right Hon. Lord Viscount Maitland. The Right Hon. Lady Viscountess Maitland. The Right Hon. Lady Louisa MacDonald. The Right Hon. Lady Augusta Murray. The Right Hon. Lady Hay MacDougall. Major General Lord MacLeod. The Hon. Mrs. Mackay. The Hon. Miss Murray. The Hon. Miss Murray. The Hon. Archibald MacDonald, Solicitor General to the King, and a Welsh judge. The Hon. Captain William Maitland. The Hon. Frederick Montague. Sir Hector Munro, Knight of the Bath. Mrs. Montague. Miss McLean. E. L. Macurds, Esq. George Macaulay, Esq. Captain, McBride. Archibald MacDonald, Esq. Edinburgh. Mr. T. MacDonald, Writer to the Signet, Edinburgh. General McNabb, ditto. Captain Hector MacNeil, Huddale. H. McNeil, Esq. Stirling. James McPherson, Esq. Mrs. Muddun. John Maddox, Esq. King's Counsel. John Maddox, June, Esq. Mrs. J. Maddox. John Medellison, Esq. Captain, Alex. Charles Maitland. Mrs. Major Banks, Lees. John Malliot, Esq. Mrs. Malliot. Miss Malliot. Edward Mason, Esq. James Mansfield, Esq. Rev. W. L. Mansell, Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. Mrs. Manson Barrick. Mrs. Manster. Mrs. Matthias. Miss Albinia Matthias. Miss C. Matthias. Thomas James Matthias, Esq. Charles Matthew, Esq. Colchester. Mrs. Matty. John Martin, Esq. Mrs. Marsh Ford. Mrs. Marshall, St. Albans. Joseph Marshall, Esq. Edrington. Maud, Esq. Miss Maud. John Maffin, Esq. Maurice, Esq. Bristol. Miss Mayaffer. Mrs. Maynard. Mrs. Meach Dorchester. Francis Mennett, Esq. Mrs. Mennett. C. Metcalf, Esq. Mrs. Mennell. Miss Harriet Mennell. William Middleton, Esq. Mrs. Middleton Stockhold. Charles Mills, Esq. T. Mills, Esq. Colchester. Mrs. Miller Glenley. Mrs. Mingay. Isaac Miners, Esq. T. Miners, June, Esq. Mrs. Mitchell, Kinghand, Norfolk. John Mitford, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. Mitchell. Miss Moffat. T. Monk, Esq. Mrs. Manu. James Montague, Esq. Mrs. Moncaster, Wallsend. Mrs. Moore, Lambeth House. Dr. Moore, M.D. Mrs. Moore. Miss Moore. Major Moore. James Moore, Esq. Graham Moore, Esq. Francis Moore, Esq. Mr. Charles Moore. Moore, Esq. Mrs. Hannah Moore. Rev. Mr. Morrison. T. Hooper Morrison, Esq. Winchester. Mrs. Morgan, Enfield. Rev. Thomas Morgan. Thomas Morgan, Esq. Chigwell, Essex. James Morley, Esq. Mrs. Morris, St. Neots. Mrs. Caroline Morris. John Morthland, Esq. Advocate, Edinburgh. Lieutenant Colonel Morse. Mrs. R. Morse. Thomas Morton, Esq. Mrs. Motto. Rev. Mr. Mountain, Colchester. F.R.C. Mundy, Esq. Martin, Derbyshire. Mrs. Mundy. Mrs. Munn, Greenwich. Mrs. M. Munn, Bromley. Mrs. Munster. Miss Murray, Edinburgh. Hutchison Muir, Esq. Daniel Mussenden, Esq. N. Hahn, Miss North. Lady Norcliffe. Major Nesbitt. John Nesham, Esq. Francis Newberry, Esq. Mrs. Newell Oxon G. L. Newnham, Esq. King's Counsel. Andrew Newton, Esq. Litchfield. Nicholas, Esq. William Nichol, Esq. Dr. John Nichol, Doctor of Laws. The Rev. Norton Nichols, Vicar of Blandestone, Suffolk. Mrs. Nichols. George Nichol, Esq. Monsieur Nicky, Doctor in Medicine, and Maitre en Chirurgie, au service de Sar Monseigneur Archiduc Ferdinand d'Autriche, and C. A Milan. Miss Noak, Bristol. Miss Noble. Miss Norton, Ipswich. O. Mrs. Oliphant. Mrs. Ord, Lonridge. Mr. Ord. Robert Orme, Esq. Robert Orme, Esq. Rev. Mr. Orme. Robert Osborne, Esq. William Osgood, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Orca Otway. Robert Auchtertony, June, Esq. Montrose. Rev. Mr. Owen. P. The Right Hon, Lady Catherine Powlett. The Hon, John J. Pratt, a Lord of the Admiralty. The Hon, Mrs. Pratt. The Hon, Miss Pratt. The Hon, Miss Pitt, Sir James Pringle, Bart. Lady Pringle. Sir Ralph Payne, Knight of the Bath. Lady Phillips. Sir T. B. Proctor, Bart. Lady B. Proctor. Sir William Pepperell, Bart. Lady Peyton. The Hon, Pelham. The Hon, Mr. Baron Perrin. The Hon, Spencer Perceval. Arthur Pigott, Esq. King's Counsel, and Solicitor General to the Prince of Wales. Thomas Palmer, Esq. William Palmer, Esq. John Palmer, Esq. Astley Palmer, Esq. Miss Palmer. The Rev. Mr. Panton. Mrs. Parker. Robert Parker, June, Esq. Halifax. Mrs. Parminster, Coninster, Somerset. Mrs. Parsons, Blagden, Somerset. Mrs. Parkhurst, Epsom. Mrs. T. Pear, Salisbury. The Rev. Mr. Pashwood. Mrs. Patrick. Mrs. Pattinson. Miss Paul. The Rev. Mr. Peach, Minister of East Shen in Surrey. Miss Pierce. Miss and Perith, Righton. Mrs. Peck. Miss Pedley. Mrs. Peg, Beechcliff, Derbyshire. Rev. T. B. Pearson, Lichfield. Henry Pelham, Esq. a Commissioner of the Customs. Mrs. Pelham. Thomas Penrose, Esq. Winchester. Miss Pepperell. Mrs. Pepys. Mrs. Perkins, Oakhill, Somerset. Mr. Perkins. Miss Perrott. Miss Perrin. James Perrin, Esq. Mrs. Phoebe, Edinburgh. Miss Phillips. Miss C. Phillips. Miss Joyce Phillips. Miss L. Phillips. Mrs. Pickard, Enfield. Miss Pickard, Colchester. Rev. Mr. Pickborn. Mrs. Pierce. Miss Pigott. Dr. Pitcairn, M.D. Lieutenant S. Playdell, Edinburgh. Hall Plumer, Esq. Mrs. Plumer. Thomas Plumer, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Pole. Miss E. Pole. Miss Poole, Hook, Sussex. Miss Poole, Hull. Mrs. Pope. Miss Pope. Miss Porter. James Potts, Esq. Kelso. Thomas Potts, Esq. Ditto. Mrs. Pavalery. Powell, Esq. Clare Hall. James Powell, Esq. Mrs. Powell. Miss Powell. Colonel Pownell. Mrs. Pownell. Thomas Powis, Esq. Berwick. Mrs. Powis. John Pratt, Esq. Bayham Abbey. Mrs. E. Pratt. S. J. Pratt, Esq. Miss Pratt, Habledown, Canterbury. W. M. Prade, June, Esq. Miss Martha Preton, Sherburn, Dorset. Jacob Preston, Esq. Mrs. Preston. Rev. Richard Price, D.D. and F.R.S. Nicholas Price, Esq. Samuel Price, Esq. Miss Price. Lacey Primat, Esq. Miss Pringle. Mark Pringle, Esq. Mrs. Pringle, Torwoodley. Mrs. Pringle, Boland. Captain John Pringle, George Field. Mr. Samuel Pritchard. Miss Proctor. G. B. Proctor, Esq. William Pulteney, Esq. Miss Pye. Anthony Pine, Esq. Winchester. R. His Grace the Duke of Roxburgh. The Right Hon, the Dowager Marchioness of Rockingham. The Right Hon, the Countess of Roths. Hon, Baron Rutherford. Lady Rich. Lady Robinson. Sir Joshua Reynolds. E. Radcliffe, Esq. Abraham Ragueneau, Esq. Rev. Mr. Rakes Measden. Mrs. Rich. Rakes Measden. Charles Rakes, Esq. William Rakes, Esq. William Matthew Rakes, Esq. Mrs. Thomas Rakes. William Ramsay, Esq. Edinburgh. William Ramsay, June, Esq. William Ramus, Esq. Miss Ramus. W. C. Ransback, Esq. Miss Randall, Southgate, Middlesex. Rev. A. Randolph, Wimbledon, Surrey. John Ranby, Esq. Miss Ruth Raper. Peter Rashley, Esq. T. Rashley, Esq. Miss Rashley. Rev. Mr. Rotherham, Houghton Le Spring. Mrs. Ravaud. Rev. Mr. Roth. Captain Raymond, Gloucester. Richard Rainsford, Esq. Ready, Esq. Gloucester. Mr. Redpath. Miss Reeves. Isaac Reed, Esq. the Rev. Dr. Rees. Mrs. Reed. Mr. James Renton Barrick. Mr. R. Renton A. Mouth. Miss Rionels. Dr. Reynolds, M.D. Richard Richards, Esq. Barrister at Law. Rev. David Richards, South Petherton, Somerset. Miss Richardson. Miss Richardson, Stratford. R. Richardson, Esq. Samuel Richardson, Esq. Miss Riddick. Mrs. Ridout, Moortown, Devon. Mr. William Riddle, Barrack, Miss Riddle, ditto. Captain Rigg. Ringstead, Esq. Horatio Ripley, Esq. John Roberts, Esq. Mrs. Roberts. Miss Roberts. Thomas Robber, Esq. William Robinson, Esq. Edinburgh. Rev. Mr. Robertson, Vicar of Horncastle. Mrs. Robertson. Mrs. Robertson, Prendergast. Dr. Robert. Henry Robart, Esq. Marriott, Somerset. Miss Rogers. Miss C. Rogers, Frenchay, Gloucestershire. Edward Rogers, Esq. Thomas Rogers, Esq. George Romney, Esq. J. Roop, Esq. James Tyrrell Ross, Esq. Mrs. W. Ross. Miss Ross. Miss Charlotte Ross. George Rofe, Esq. Winchester. T. Round, Esq. Colchester. Mr. James Round, St. John's College, Cambridge. John Rowe, Esq. J. Royal, Esq. John Royds, Esq. Napton. Royer, Esq. Liverpool. Edward Rudge, Esq. June. Mrs. Henry Russell. Mrs. Russell. Russell, Esq. Miss Rushbrook. Major Rutherford, Edgerstone. Miss Rives. Mrs. R. St. Albans. S. The Right Hon. The Countess Dowager Spencer. The Right Hon. Lord Robert Spencer. The Right Hon. Lady Sheffield. Lord Chief Baron Skinner. Lady Skinner. Sir John Sheffield Bart. Sir Joseph Senhouse. Sir Edward Smythe. Thomas Steele, Esq. Secretary of the Treasury, Miss A. C. Sadell, Edinburgh. James Sager, Esq. Samuel Salt, Esq. Mr. Samwell. Dr. Sander, M.D. Chichester. Miss Sands. Miss Harriet Sands. Mrs. Sandys Lexton. Rev. Dr. Sanford. John Sargent, Esq. Mrs. Sargent. John Sargent, June, Esq. Lavington, Sussex. Mrs. Saunderson. William Scaife, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. Schroeder, Enfield. Mrs. Scott. Miss Scott, Hull. Rev. Russell Scott, Milburn Port, Somerset. Miss Scott, ditto. John Scott, Esq. King's Counsel. Mrs. Scott, Sherburne, Dorset. Miss Scott, Chigwell. William Scullard, Esq. F. N. Siranch, Esq. Hatfield, Hearts. Humphrey Senhause, Esq. Netherhall. Mrs. Senhause. Miss Seward, Lichfield. William Seward, Esq. Mrs. Sharp, Bamborough Castle, Rev. Dr. Sharp, Archdeacon of Northumberland. Mr. Richard Sharp. Miss Shadwell. Robert Shafto, Esq. Mrs. Shafto. R. Shaw, Esq. Samuel Shepherd, Esq. Mrs. Shepherd. Miss Shells. Mrs. Shelley Bath. Samuel Shore, June, Esq. Mrs. Short. Henry Shrine, Esq. R. Shute, Esq. James Sibbald, Esq. Mrs. Sibbald. Mrs. A. Sibbett Shoreswood. William Siddons, Esq. Mrs. Siddons. George Silvertop, Esq. Stella. Mrs. Silvertop. John Simpson, Esq. William Simpson, Esq. Rev. Mr. Simpson. Miss Simpson Bradley. Miss Simmons. Lieutenant General Skeen. Mrs. Slater, Hasselbury, Somerset. Mrs. Smale Mains. Alexander Small, Esq. Mrs. Smith, Widowberry Forest. Mrs. Smith. Mr. John Smith, Dunce. Miss Smith. Mr. Edward Smith, Cornhill. Mrs. Smith. Miss J. Smith. Robert Orme Smith, Esq. William Smeekshanks, Esq. Nathaniel Smythe, Esq. Deputy Chairman of the East India Company. Mrs. Smythe. Rev. Mr. Y. Smithies, Colchester. Charles Snell, Esq. Sneedisham, Norfolk. Society at the Academy, Soho. Robert Sparrow, Esq. Mrs. Spurling, Colchester. John Spranger, Esq. Barrister at Law. George Stainforth, Esq. Mrs. Stainforth. John Stanley, Esq. Barrister at Law. William Starr, June, Esq. Mrs. Stark, Epsom. Miss Stark, ditto. Mrs. Stord Barrack. Colonel Stehelen, of the Royal Regiment of Artillery. R. Sterling, Esq. Colchester. Miss Stevens, Lowell House, Devon. Robert Stevenson, Esq. Dr. Stevenson, Barrack. Miss Stevenson. David Stevenson, Esq. David Stewart, Esq. Edinburgh. Mrs. Stewart, Stewart Hall. Mr. Stewart, Professor of Moral Philosophy, Edinburgh. Thomas Stewart, Esq. David Stewart, Esq. Francis Stevens, Esq. Mrs. F. Steele. Miss Steele, Broughton, Hants. Andrew Sterling, Esq. Drumpler. John Sterling, Esq. James Sterling, Esq. Miss Steele. Thomas Stillingfleet, Esq. Miss Stisted, Ipswich. John Herford Stone, Esq. Hackney. Hardinge Stracey, Esq. Mrs. Stracey. Miss Strangeways, Chiswick. Mrs. Strachey. Mrs. Stride. Sturch, Esq. Miss Summer. A. H. Sutherland, Esq. A. M. Sutton, Esq. Barrister at Law. John Swale, Esq. Mrs. J. Swale. Henry Swan, Esq. Kelso. Rev. Mr. Swedley. Miss Sykes, West Ella, Yorkshire. Mrs. Symes, Weymouth. T. The Right Hon, Lord Viscount Tracy. The Right Hon, Lady Viscountess Tracy. The Right Hon, Lady Elizabeth Tufton. The Right Hon, Lady Charlotte Tufton. The Hon, Mrs. Tracy, Bedchamber Woman to the Queen. Mrs. Talbot Fulham. Rev. Richard Tipprell, Milbourne Port, Somerset. Mrs. Tasberg. George Taswell, Esq. John Taylor, Esq. Birmingham. The Rev. John Taylor. Miss Taylor. Henry Templar, Esq. Captain, Turot Barrack. Miss Turot ditto. Peter Thellison, Esq. Mrs. Thellison. James Theobald, Esq. Mrs. Theobald. Thomas Thomas, Esq. Miss Thomas. David Thomas. Miss Thornton. Miss Thompson. Alexander Thompson, Esq. Richard Thompson, Esq. Mr. Robert Thompson, Ayton. George Thompson, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mr. James Thompson, Bland. Edward Thorley, Esq. Colchester. Mrs. G. Thornton. Tilson, Esq. Watlington Park. Mr. Tilson. John Todd, Esq. Kirklands. Rev. Mr. Toller, Islington. Mrs. Toller, South Petherton, Somerset. James Toogood, Esq. Sherburne, Dorset. Mrs. Toogood, Ilton, Somerset. Matthew Toogood, Esq. John Toogood, Esq. Dr. Topping, M.D. The Rev. Joshua Tolman, Taunton, Somerset. Samuel Tolman, Esq. Miss Tolman, Hackney. John Touchett, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss Touchett. The Rev. Dr. Towers. Miss Townsend. Mrs. D. Trotman, Ipswich. Mrs. R. Trotman. The Rev. Mr. Troxoid. Henry Tucker, Esq. Bermuda. Dr. Tucker, M.D. Hull. John Turnbull, Esq. Miss Turnbull, Barrack. Miss Turner, Uxbridge. Miss Margaret Turner, William Turner, Esq. Lexden. F. Twiss, Esq. V. Hahn, Miss Verney. William Vachel, Esq. Mrs. Vachel. Miss Vachel. Miss F. Valiant. William Vanbrugh, Esq. Mrs. Vanbrugh. Arthur Van Sittert, Esq. Miss Van Sittert. Edward Van Sittert, Esq. Winchester. Edward Van Harthalls, Esq. William Very, Esq. Benjamin Vaughan, Esq. Miss Vickery. Vowell, Esq. Sherborne, Dorset. Rev. Mr. Uredale, Suffolk. Rev. Mr. Ackwart. The Rev. Dr. Vyse, Lambeth. W. The Right Rev. the Bishop of Winchester. The Right Hon, Lord Willoughby de Broke, a Lord of the Bedchamber. The Right Hon, Lord Walsham, one of the 5 commissioners for the management of the affairs of the East Indies. The Hon, Horace Walpole. The late Lady Whitworth. The Rev. Mr. Wakefield, Minister of Richmond in Surrey. Mrs. T. Wakefield. Rev. Mr. G. Wakefield, Nottingham. Mrs. Wakefield. Miss Walker. Dr. Wall, LL.D. of Christ Church in the University of Oxford. Capel Wall, Esq. William Waller, Esq. Barrister at Law. Mrs. Walker Southgate. Walker, Esq. June ditto. Rev. William Walker, Fellow of Pembroke College, Cambridge. William Walker, Esq. Mr. Wanastroct, Kensington. Mrs. Wansley, June Warminster, Wilts. George Wansley, Esq. ditto. Dr. Warren, M.D. Miss Warren. Miss Ward. Miss Ward, Marlborough. Mr. Thomas Ward, ditto. John Watherston, Esq. of the Navy. Miss Watson, Bridgewater, Somerset. Henry Watson, Esq. FRS. Mrs. Webster. Miss Webster. Miss F. Webster. Mr. James Webber, Chichester. Mrs. Wegg, Colchester. Miss S. Wegg. Miss Welby. R. E. Welby, Esq. Mrs. Wellman, Poundsford Park, Somerset. Simon Wellman, Esq. Taunton, Somerset. William Wellbank, Esq. Miss Weston, Ludlow. Mrs. West, Rev. Dr. Wharton, Winchester College. Rev. Mr. Tho. Wharton, Trinity College, Oxford. Rev. Thomas said. Whalley, A.M. Longford Court, Somerset. Mrs. Watley. Mrs. Whatman. Miss Whatman. Mrs. White. Rev. Henry White, Lichfield. J. White, Esq. Barrister at Law. Miss White. Mrs. T. White. Mrs. White. Miss Whitworth. Miss Whitworth. Mrs. W. Whiteman, Eyemouth. Wigan, Esq. Rev. Thomas William White, A.M. Fellow of Queen's College, Cambridge. Captain Wilkie, Lady Thorne. Mrs. Wilkie, Fowlden. Miss Wilkie, ditto. Miss Wilberforce, Hull. Dr. Willan, M.B. Thomas Willerter, Esq. Miss Willis. Miss M. B. Williams. Mrs. N. Halings Williams. Alexander Wills, Esq. Edward Wilmot, Esq. Henry Wilmot, Esq. Mrs. Wilmot. Mr. Wilson. Miss Wilson. Mrs. Wilson, Coldstream. Rev. F. Wilson, Sulhamstead. Henry Wilkinson, Esq. New Bottle. William Winter, Esq. Colonel Windus. Miss Wishaw. Rev. Dr. George Wollaston. Miss Wollaston. Thomas Woodthorpe, Esq. Bilesden, Ongar, Essex. Mr. Wood, Edinburgh. Mrs. Wood, Berwick. Miss Wood, ditto. Captain Wood, of the 29th Regiment. Lieutenant Edward Wood, Royal Regiment of Artillery. James Wood, June, Esq. Berwick. John Wood, Esq. Beadnell. Mrs. Wood, Bamborough. Mr. Wood, Preston. Dr. Wood, M.D. Colchester. Mrs. Wood, Putney. Miss Wood, ditto. Mrs. Ray. William Wright, Esq. James Wyatt, Esq. Mrs. Wyatt. Y. His Grace the Archbishop of York, the Hon, John York. Richard Yates, Esq. John Yeoman, Esq. Muris. Mrs. York. Charles York, Esq. Mr. Robert Young, Edinburgh. Mrs. Young. Miss Young. Mrs. Young husband, Elwick. T. P. Evanet, Esq. The following names have been received since the list was printed. The Right Hon, the Countess of Uxbridge. The Right Hon, Lord Viscount Duncannon. Mrs. Alves, Edinburgh. Mrs. Buckley. Mr. Drury, Shields. Mrs. Haswell, Teignmouth. Mrs. Huddleston, Shields. Mrs. Hudson, Whitby. Robert Trotman, Esq. Of the first volume. An American Tale. Sonnet to Mrs. Bates. Sonnet to Twilight. To Sensibility. A Song. An Ode on the Peace. Edwin and Eltruda, A Legendary Tale. A Hymn. Paraphrases from Scripture. An American Tale. Ah! Pity all the pangs I feel, if pity e'er ye knew, an aged father's wounds to heal, through scenes of death I flew. Perhaps my hastening steps are vain, perhaps the warrior dies, yet let me soothe each parting pain, yet lead me where he lies. Thus to the listening band she calls, nor fruitless her desire, they lead her, panting, to the walls that hold her captive sire. And is a daughter come to bless these aged eyes once more? Thy father's pains will now be less, his pains will now be o'er. My father! By this waning lamp thy form I faintly trace, yet sure thy brow is cold, and damp, and pale thy honored face. In vain thy wretched child is come, she comes too late to save, and only now can share thy doom, and share thy peaceful grave. Soft, as amid the lunar beams, the falling shadows bend, upon the bosom of the streams, so soft her tears descend. Those tears a father ill can bear, he lives, my child, for thee. A gentle youth, with pitying care, has lent his aid to me. Born in the Western world, his hand maintains its hostile cause, and fierce against Britannia's band his erring sword he draws. Yet feels the captive Briton's woe, for his ennobled mind forgets the name of Britain's foe, in love of humankind. Yet know, my child, a dearer tie has linked his heart to mine. He mourns with friendship's holy sigh, the youth beloved of thine. But hark! His welcome feet are near, thy rising grief suppress, by darkness veiled, he hastens here to comfort and to bless. Stranger! For that dear father's sake she cried, in accents mild, who lives by thy kind pity, take the blessings of his child. Oh, if in heaven my Edward's breast this deed of mercy knew, that gives my tortured bosom rest, he sure would bless thee too. Oh, tell me where my lover fell. The fatal scene recall, his last, dear accents, stranger, tell, oh haste and tell me all. Say, if he gave to love the sigh, that set his spirit free, say, did he raise his closing eye, as if it sought for me? Ask not, her father cried, to know what known were added pain, nor think, my child, the tale of woe thy softness can sustain. Though every joy with Edward fled, when Edward's friend is near, it soothes my breaking heart, she said, to tell those joys were dear. The western ocean rolled in vain its parting waves between, my Edward braved the Dangrouse main, and blessed our native scene. Soft Isis heard his artless tale, ah, stream forever dear, whose waters, as they passed the vale, received a lover's tear. How could a heart, that virtue loved, and sure that heart is mine, lamented youth, behold unmoved the virtues that were thine? Calm, as the surface of the lake, when all the winds are still, mild, as the beams of morning break, when first they light the hill. So calm was his unruffled soul, where no rude passion strove, so mild his soothing accents stole, upon the ear of love. Where are the dear illusions fled which soothed my former hours? Where is the path that fancy spread, ah, vainly spread with flowers? I heard the battle's fearful sounds, they seemed my lover's knell. I heard, that pierced with ghastly wounds, my Vendrau's lover fell. My sorrows shall with life endure, for he I loved is gone. But something tells my heart, that sure my life will not be long. My panting soul can bear no more, the youth, impatient, cried, 'Tis Edward bids thy griefs be o'er, my love, my destined bride. The life which he then preserved, how blessed, how fondly prized by me, since dear to my Amelia's breast, since valued still by thee. My father saw my constant pain, when thee I left behind, nor longer will his power restrain the ties my soul would bind. And soon thy honored sire shall cease the captive's lot to bear, and we, my love, will soothe to peace his griefs, with filial care. Then come forever to my soul. Amelia, come, and prove how calm our blissful years will roll, along a life of love. Sonnet. To Mrs. Bates. O thou whose melody the heart obeys, thou who canst all its subject passions move, whose notes to heave and the listening soul can raise, can thrill with pity, or can melt with love. Happy! Whom nature lent this native charm, whose melting tones can shed with magic power a sweeter pleasure o'er the social hour, the breast to softness soothe, to virtue warm, but yet more happy, that thy life as clear from discord, as thy perfect cadence flows, that tune to sympathy, thy faithful tear, in mild accordance falls for others' woes, that all the tender, Pure affections bind in chains of harmony, thy willing mind. Sonnet. To twilight. Meek twilight. Soften the declining day, and bring the hour my pensive spirit loves, when o'er the mountain flow descends the ray that gives to silence the deserted groves. Ah, let the happy court the morning still, when, in her blooming loveliness arrayed, she bids fresh beauty light the vale, or hill, and rapture warble in the vocal shade. Sweet is the odor of the morning's flower, and rich in melody her accents rise, yet dearer to my soul the shadowy hour, at which her blossoms close, her music dies, for then, while languid nature droops her head, she wakes the tear 'tis luxury to shed. To sensibility. In sensibility's loved praise I tune my trembling reed, and seek to deck her shrine with bays on which my heart must bleed. No cold exemption from her pain I ever wish to know, cheered with her transport, I sustain without complaint her woe. Above whatever content can give, above the charm of ease, the restless hopes and fears that live with her have power to please. Where but for her were friendship's power to heal the wounded heart, to shorten sorrow's lingering hour, and bid its gloom depart. 'Tis she that lights the melting eye with looks to anguish dear, she knows the price of every sigh, the value of a tear. She prompts the tender marks of love which words can scarce express, the heart alone their force can prove, and feel how much they bless. Of every finer bliss the source, 'tis she on love bestows the softer grace, the boundless force confiding passion knows. When to another the fond breast each thought forever gives, when on another leans for rest, and in another lives. Quick, as the trembling meadow flies, when heat or cold impels, her anxious heart to joy can rise, or sink where anguish dwells. Yet though her soul must grief sustain which she alone can know, and feel that keener sense of pain which sharpens every woe. Though she the mourner's grief to calm, still shares each pang they feel, and, like the tree distilling balm, bleeds others' wounds to heal. While she, whose bosom fondly true, has never wished to range, one altered look will trembling view, and scarce can bear the change. Though she, if death the bands should tear, she vainly thought secure, through life must languish in despair that never hopes a cure. Though wounded by some vulgar mind, unconscious of the deed, who never seeks those wounds to bind but wonders why they bleed. She oft will heave a secret sigh, will shed a lonely tear, o'er feelings nature wrought so high, and gave on terms so dear. Yet who would hard indifference choose, whose breast no tears can steep? Who, for her apathy, would lose the sacred power to weep? Though in 1,000 objects pain and pleasure tremble nigh, those objects strive to reach, in vain, the circle of her eye. Cold, as the fabled god appears to the poor suppliant's grief, who bathes the marble form in tears, and vainly hopes relief. Ah, Grieville! Why the gifts refused to souls like thine allied? No more thy nature seem to lose, no more thy softness hide. No more invoke the playful sprite to chill, with magic spell, the tender feelings of delight, and anguish sung so well. That envities thy heart would prove were sure too dearly bought with friendship, sympathy, and love, and every finer thought. A song. I. No riches from his scanty store my lover could impart. He gave a boon I valued more. He gave me all his heart. 2. His soul sincere, his generous worth, might well this bosom move, and when I asked for bliss on earth, I only meant his love. 3. But now for me, in search of gain from shore to shore he flies. Why wander riches to obtain, when love is all I prize? 4. The frugal meal, the lowly caitiff blessed my love with thee. That simple fare, that humble lot, were more than wealth to me. V. While he the dangerous ocean braves, my tears but vainly flow. Is pity in the faithless waves to which I pour my woe? 6. The night is dark, the waters deep, yet soft the billows roll. Alas! At every breeze I weep, the storm is in my soul. An ode on the peace. I. As wandering late on Albion's shore that chains the rude tempestuous deep, I heard the hollow surges roar and vainly beat her guardian steep. I heard the rising sounds of woe loud on the storm's wild pinion flow, and still they vibrate on the mournful lyre, that tunes to grief its sympathetic wire. 2. From shores the wide Atlantic laves, the spirit of the ocean bears and moans, along his western waves, afflicted nature's hopeless cares, enchanting scenes of young delight. How changed since first ye rose to sight, since first ye rose in infant glories drayest fresh from the wave, and reared your ample breast. 3. Her crested serpents, discord throws o'er scenes which love with roses gracked. The flowery chain his hands compose, she wildly scatters o'er the waste. Her glance his playful smile deforms, her frantic voice awakes the storms. From land to land, her torches spread their fires, while love's pure flame in streams of blood expires. 4. Now burns the savage soul of war, while terror flashes from his eyes. Lo! Waving o'er his fiery car aloft his bloody banner flies. The battle wakes. With awful sound he thunders o'er the echoing ground. He grasps his reeking blade, while streams of blood tinge the vast plain, and swell the purple flood. But softer sounds of sorrow flow. On drooping wing the murmuring gales have borne the deep complaints of woe that rose along the lonely valleys. Those breezes waft the orphan's cries, they tremble to parental sighs, and drink a tear for keener anguish shed, the tear of faithful love when hope is fled. 6. The object of her anxious fear lies pale on earth, expiring, cold, ere, winged by happy love, 1 year too rapid in its course, has rolled. In vain the dying hand she grasps, hangs on the quivering lip, and clasps the fainting form, that slowly sinks in death, to catch the parting glance, the fleeting breath. 7. Pale as the livid corse her cheek, her tresses torn, her glance is wild, how fearful was her frantic shriek! She wept, and then in horrors smilled, she gazes now with wild affright. Lo! Bleeding phantoms rush in sight, hark! On yon mangled form the mourner calls, then on the earth a senseless weight she falls. 8. And see! O'er gentle Andre's tomb, the victim of his own despair, who fell in life's exulting bloom, nor deemed that life deserved a care. O'er the cold earth his relics pressed, lo! Britain's drooping legions rest, for him the swords they sternly grasp, appear dim with a sigh, and sullied with a tear. 9. While Seward sweeps her plaintive strings, while pensive round his sable shrine, a radiant zone she graceful flings, where full and blazed his virtues shine. The mournful loves that tremble nigh shall catch her warm melodious sigh. The mournful loves shall drink the tears that flow from pity's hovering soul, dissolved in woe. X. And hark! In Albion's flowery vale a parent's deep complaint I hear. A sister calls the western gale to waft her soul-expressive tear. 'Tis as guilt claims that piercing sigh, that drop which dims the beauteous eye, while on the rack of doubt affection proves how strong the force which binds the ties she loves. 11. How oft in every dawning grace that blossomed in his early hours, her soul some comfort loved to trace, and decked futurity in flowers. But lo! In fancy's troubled sight the dear illusions sink in night. She views the murdered form, the quivering breath, the rising virtues chilled in shades of death. 12. Cease ye throbs of hopeless woe. He lives the future hours to bless, he lives, the purest joy to know, parental transport's fond excess. His sight a father's eye shall cheer, a sister's drooping charms endear. The private pang was Albion's generous care, for him she breathed a warm accepted prayer. 13. And lo! A radiant stream of light defending, gilds the murky cloud, where desolation's gloomy night retiring, folds her sable shroud. It flashes o'er the brightening deep, it softens Britain's frowning steep. 'Tis mild benignant peace, enchanting form, that gilds the black abyss, that lulls the storm. 14. So through the dark, impending sky, where clouds and fallen vapors rolled, their curling reeds dissolving fly as the faint hues of light unfold. The air with spreading azure streams, the sun now darts his orient beams, and now the mountains glow, the woods are bright, while nature hails the season of delight. 15. Mild peace! From Albion's fairest bowers pure spirit, cull with snowy hands the buds that drink the morning showers, and bind the realms in flowery bands. Thy smiles the angry passions chase, thy glance is pleasure's native grace. Around thy form exulting virtues move, and thy soft call awakes the strain of love. 16. Bless, all ye powers! The patriot name that courts fair peace, thy gentle stay, ah! Gild with glory's light, his fame, and glad his life with pleasure's ray. While, like a frighted dove, thy form still shrinks, and fears some latent storm, his cares shall soothe thy panting soul to rest, and spread thy vernal couch on Albion's breast. 17. Ye, who have mourned the parting hour, which love in darker horrors drew, ye, who have vainly tried to pour with faltering voice the last adieu, when the pale cheek, the bursting sigh, the soul that veering in the eye, expressed the pains it felt, the pains it feared, ah! Paint the youth's return, by grief endeared. 18. Yon hoary form, with aspect mild, deserted kneels by anguish pressed, and seeks from heaven his long-lost child, to smooth the path that leads to rest. He comes, to close the sinking eye, to catch the faint, expiring sigh. A moment's transport stays the fleeting breath, and soothes the soul on the pale verge of death. 19. No more the sanguine wreath shall twine on the lost hero's early tomb, but hum around thy simple shrine fair peace. Shall milder glories bloom. Lo! Commerce lifts her drooping head triumphal, Thames, from thy deep bed, and bears to Albion, on her sail sublime, the riches nature gives each happier clime. XX. She fearless prints the polar snows, mid horrors that reject the day, along the burning line she glows, nor shrinks beneath the torrid ray. She opens India's glittering mine, where streams of light reflected shine, wafts the bright gems to Britain's temperate vale, and breathes her odors on the northern gale. 21. While from the far divided shore where liberty unconquered roves, her ardent glance shall oft explore the parent isle her spirit loves, shall spread upon the western main, harmonious Concord's golden chain, while stern on Gallia's ever hostile strand from Albion's cliff she pours her daring band. 22. Yet hide the sabre's hideous glare whose edge is bathed in streams of blood, the lance that quivers high in air, and falling drinks a purple flood, for Britain! Fear shall seize thy foes, while freedom in thy senate glows, while peace shall smile upon thy cultured plain, with grace and beauty her attendant train. 23. Enchanting visions soothe my sight, the finer arts no more oppressed, benignant source of pure delight. On her soft bosom love to rest. While each discordant sound expires, strike harmony. Strike all thy wires. The fine vibrations of the spirit move and touch the springs of rapture and of love. 24. Bright paintings living forms shall rise, and wrapped in Ugolino's woe, shall Reynolds wake unbidden sighs, and Romney's graceful pencil flow, that nature's look benign portrays, when to her infant Shakespeare's gaze the partial nymph unveiled her awful face, and bade his colors clear her features trace. Ugolino's woe, a celebrated picture by Sir Joshua Reynolds, taken from Dante. Nature's look benign portrays, a subject Mr. Ramy has taken from Gray's Progress of Poesy. 25. And poesy, thy deep tone shall the heart shall soothe, the spirit fire, and all the passions sink, or swell, in true accordance to the lyre. Oh! Ever wake its heave-in oi sound, oh! Call thy lovely visions round, strew the soft path of peace with fancy's flowers, with raptures bless the soul that feels thy powers. 26. While Haley wakes thy magic string, his shades shall no rude sound profane, but stillness on her folded wing, enamored catch his soothing strain, though genius breathe its purest flame, around his lyre's enchanting frame, though music there in every period roll, more warm his friendship, and more pure his soul. 27. While taste refines a polished age, while her own herd shall bid us trace the luster of the finished page where symmetry sheds perfect grace, with sober and collected ray to fancy, judgment shall display the faultless model, where accomplished art from nature draws a charm that leads the heart. 28. Historic muse illumes the maze for ages veiled in gloomy night, where empire with meridian blaze once trod ambition's giddy height, though headlong from the Dangrau steep its pageants rolled with wasteful sweep, her tablet still records the deeds of fame and wakes the patriots, and the hero's flame. 29. While meek philosophy explores creation's vast stupendous round, sublime her piercing vision soars, and bursts the system's distant bound. Lo! Mid the dark deep void of space a rushing world, her eye can trace. It moves majestic in its ample sphere, sheds its long light, and rolls its lingering year. Alluding to Mr. Herschel's wonderful discoveries, and particularly to his discovery of a new planet called the Georgium Sidus. XXX. Ah! Still diffuse thy genial ray, fair science, on my Albion's plain, and still thy grateful homage pay where Montague has reared her fane, where eloquence and wit entwine their Attic wreath around her shrine, and still, while learning shall unfold her store, with their bright signet stamp the classic ore. 31. Enlightening peace! For thine the hours that wisdom decks in moral grace, and thine invention's fairy powers, the charm improved of nature's face. Propitious come! In silence laid beneath thy olive's grateful shade, pour the mild bliss that suits the tuneful mind, and in thy zone the hostile spirit bind. 32. While Albion on her parent deep shall rest, may glory light her shore, may honor there his vigils keep till time shall wing its course no more, till angels wrap the spheres in fire, till earth and yon fair orbs expire, while chaos mounted on the wasting flame, shall spread eternal shade o'er nature's frame. Edwin and Eltruda, a legendary tale. Mark it, Cesario, it is old and plain, the spinsters and the knitters in the sun, and the free maids, that weave their thread with bones de use to chan it. It is silly, sooth, and dallies with the innocence of love, like the old age. Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Edwin and Eltruda, a legendary tale. Where the pure Derwent's waters glide along their mossy bed, close by the river's verdant side, a castle reared its head. The ancient pile by time is razed, where Gothic trophies frowned, where once the gilded armor blazed, and banners waved around. There lived a chief, well known to fame, a bold advent-roused knight, renowned for victory, his name in glory's annals bright. What time in martial pomp he led his gallant, chosen train, the foe, who oft had conquered, fled, indignant fled the plain. Yet milder virtues he possessed, and gentler passions felt, for in his calm and yielding breast the soft affections dwelt. No rugged toils the heart could steel, by nature formed to prove whatever the tender mind can feel, in friendship, or in love. He lost the partner of his breast, who soothed each rising care, and ever charmed the pains to rest she ever loved to share. From solitude he hopped relief, and this lone mansion sought, to cherish there his faithful grief, to nurse the tender thought. There, to his bosom fondly dear, an infant daughter smiled, and oft the mourner's falling tear bedewed his Emma's child. The tear, as o'er the babe he hung, would tremble in his eye, while blessings, faltering on his tongue, were breathed but in a sigh. Though time could never heal the wound, it soothed the hopeless pain, and in his child he thought he found his Emma lived again. Soft, as the dews of morn arise, and on the pale flower gleam, so soft Eltruda's melting eyes with love and pity beam. As drayest in charms, the lonely flower smiles in the desert vale, with beauty gilds the morning hour, and scents the evening gale. So lived in solitude, unseen, this lovely, peerless maid, so gracked the wild, sequestered scene, and blossomed in the shade. Yet love could pierce the lone recess, for there he likes to dwell, to leave the noisy crowd, and bless with happiness the cell. To wing his sure resistless dart, where all its force is known, and rule the undivided heart despotic, and alone. Young Edwin charmed her gentle breast, though scanty all his store, no hoarded treasures he possessed, yet he could boast of more. For he could boast a liberal heart, and honor, sense, and truth, unwarped by vanity or art, adorn the generous youth. The maxims of a servile age, the mean, the selfish care, the sordid views, that now engage the mercenary pair, whom riches can unite, or part, to them were still unknown, for then the sympathetic heart was joined by love alone. They little knew that wealth had power to make the constant rove, they little knew the weighty dower could add one bliss to love. Her virtues every charm improved, or made those charms more dear, for surely virtue to be loved has only to appear. Domestic bliss, unvexed by strife, beguiled the circling hours, she, who on every path of life can shed perennial flowers. Eltruda, o'er the distant mead, would haste, at closing day, and to the bleeding mother lead the lamb, that chanked to stray. For the bruised insect on the waist, a sigh would heave her breast, and oft her careful hand replacked the linnet's falling nest. To her, sensations calm as these could sweet delight impart. These simple pleasures most can please the uncorrupted heart. Full oft with eager steps she flies to cheer the roofless cot, where the lone widow breathes her sighs, and wails her desperate lot. Their weeping mother's trembling knees, her lisping infants clasp, their meek, imploring look she sees, she feels their tender grasp. Wild throbs her aching bosom swell, they mark the bursting sigh, nature has formed the soul to feel, they weep, unknowing why. Her hands the liberal boon impart, and much her tear avails to raise the mourner's drooping heart, where feeble utterance fails. On the pale cheek, where hung the tear of agonizing woe, she bids the cheerful bloom appear, the tear of rapture flow. Thus on soft wing the moments flew, though love implored their stay, while some new virtue rose to view, and marked each fleeting day. The youthful poet's soothing dream of golden ages past, the muse's fond, ideal theme, was realized at last. But vainly here we hope, that bliss unchanging will endure. Ah, in a world so vain as this, what heart can rest secure? For now arose the fatal day for civil discord famed, when York, from Lancaster's proud sway, the regal scepter claimed. Each moment now the horrors brought of desolating rage, the famed achievements now were wrought, that swell historic page. The good old Albert pants, again to dare the hostile field, the cause of Henry to maintain, for him, the lance to wield. But oh, 1,000 generous ties, that bind the hero's soul, 1,000 tender claims arise, and Edwin's breast control. Though passion pleads in Henry's cause, and Edwin's heart would sway, yet honor's stern, imperious laws, the brave will still obey. Oppressed with many an anxious care, full oft Eltrudis sight, complaining that relentless war should those she loved divide. At length the parting morn arose, in gloomy vapors drayest, the pensive maiden's sorrow flows, and terror heaves her breast. 1,000 pangs the father feels, 1,000 rising fears, while clinging at his feet she kneels, and bathes them with her tears. A pitying tear bedewed his cheek, from his loved child he flew, o'erwhelmed, the father could not speak, he could not say adieu. Armed for the field, her lover he saw her pallid look, and trembling seized her drooping frame, while faltering, thus he spoke. This cruel tenderness but wounds the heart it means to bless. Those falling tears, those mournful sounds, increase the vain distress. If fate, she answered, has decreed that on the hostile plain my Edwin's faithful heart must bleed, and swell the heap of slain, trust me, my love, I'll not complain. I'll shed no fruitless tear, not one weak drop my cheek shall stain, or tell what passes here. Oh, let thy fate of others claim a tear, a mournful sigh. I'll only murmur thy dear name, call on my love, and die. But ah! how vain for words to tell the pang their bosoms proved. They only will conceive it well, they only, who have loved. The timid muse forbears to say what laurels Edwin gained, how Albert long renowned, that day his ancient fame maintained. The bard, who feels congenial fire, may sing of martial strife, and with heroic sounds inspire the generous scorn of life. But ill the theme would suit her reed, who, wandering through the grove, forgets the conquering hero's meed, and gives a tear to love. Though long the closing day was fled, the fight they still maintain, while night a deeper horror shed along the darkened plain. To Albert's breast an arrow flew, he felt a mortal wound, the drops that warmed his heart bedew the cold and flinty ground. The foe, who aimed the fatal dart, now heard his dying sighs, compassion touched his yielding heart, to Albert's aid he flies. While round the chief his arms he cast, while oft he deeply sighed, and seemed, as if he mourned the past, old Albert faintly cried, though nature heaves these parting groans, without complaint I die. Yet one dear care my heart still owns, still feels one tender tie. For York, a warrior known to fame, uplifts the hostile spear. Edwin the blooming hero's name, to Albert's bosom dear. Oh, tell him my expiring sigh, say my last words implored, to my despairing child to fly. To her he once oudared. He spoke, But oh, what mournful strain, whose force the soul can melt, what moving numbers shall explain the pang that Edwin felt? The pang that Edwin now revealed, for he the warrior pressed, whom the dark shades of night concealed, close to his throbbing breast. Fly, fly, he cried, my touch profane. Oh, how the rest impart! Revered old man, could Edwin stain with Albert's blood the dart? His languid eyes he meekly raised, which seemed forever closed, on the pale youth with pity gazed, and then in death reposed. I'll go, the hapless Edwin said, and breathe a last adieu, and with the drops despair will shed, my mournful love bedew. I'll go to her forever dear, to catch her melting sigh, to wipe from her pale cheek the tear, and at her feet to die. And as to her forever dear the frantic mourner flew, to wipe from her pale cheek the tear, and breathe a last adieu. Appalled his troubled fancy sees Eltruda's anguish flow, and hears in every passing breeze the plaintive sound of woe. Meanwhile the anxious maid, whose tears in vain would heave and implore, of Albert's fate despairing hears, but yet had heard no more. She saw her much-loved Edwin near, she saw, and deeply sight, her cheek was bathed in many a tear, at length she faintly cried, unceasing grief this heart must prove. Its dearest ties are broke. Oh, say, what ruthless arm, my love, could aim the fatal stroke? Could not thy hand, my Edwin, thine, have warded off the blow? For oh, he was not only mine, he was thy father too. No more the youth could pangs endure, his lips could never tell. From death he vainly hoped a cure, as cold, on earth he fell. She flew, she gave her sorrows vent, 1,000 tears she poured, her mournful voice, her moving plaint, the youth to life restored. Why does thy bosom throb with pain? She cried, my Edwin, speak. Or sure, unable to sustain this grief, my heart will break. Yes, it will break, he faltering cried. For me will life resign. Then trembling know thy father died, and know the guilt was mine. It is enough. With short, quick breath, exclaimed the fainting maid, she spoke no more, but seemed from death to look for instant aid. In plaintive accents, Edwin cries, and have I murdered thee? To other worlds thy spirit flies, and mine this stroke shall free. His hand a lifted weapon grasped, the steel he firmly pressed, when wildly she arose, and clasped her lover to her breast. Methought, she cried with panting breath, my Edwin talked of peace. I knew 'twas only found in death, and feared that sad release. I clasp him still, 'twas but a dream. Help yon wide wound to close, from which a father's spirit stream, a father's lifeblood flows. But see, from thee he shrinks, nor would be blasted by thy touch. Ah, though my Edwin spilt thy blood, yet once he loved thee much. My father, yet in pity stay. I see his white beard wave. A spirit beckons him away, and points to yonder grave. Alas, my love, I trembling hear a father's last adieu. I see the falling tear, his wrinkled cheek bedew. He's gone, and here his ashes sleep. I do not heave a sigh. His child a father does not weep. For my brain is dry. But come, together let us rove, at the pale hour of night, when the moon wandering through the grove shall pour her faintest light. We'll gather from the rosy bower the fairest wreaths that bloom. We'll cull, my love, each opening flower, to deck his hallowed tomb. We'll thither, from the distant dale, a weeping willow bear, and plant a lily of the vale, a drooping lily there. We'll shun the face of glaring day, eternal silence keep, through the dark wood together stray, and only live to weep. But hark, 'tis come, the fatal time, when, Edwin, we must part. Some angel tells me 'tis a crime to hold thee to my heart. My father's spirit hovers near. Alas, he comes to chide. Is there no means, my Edwin dear, the fatal deed to hide? Yet, Edwin, if th offense be thine, too soon I can forgive. But oh, the guilt would all be mine, could I endure to live. Farewell, my love, for oh, I faint, of pale despair I die. And see, that hoary, murdered saint descends from yon blue sky. Poor, weak old man! He comes, my love. to lead to heaven the way. He knows not heaven will joyless prove, if Edwin here must stay. Oh, who can bear this pang? He cried, then to his bosom pressed the dying maid, who piteous sight, and sunk to endless rest. He saw her eyes forever close, he heard her latest sigh, and yet no tear of anguish flows from his distracted eye. He feels within his shivering veins a mortal chillness rise, her pallid course he feebly strains, and on her bosom dies. No longer may their hapless lot the mournful muse engage, she wipes away the tears that blot the melancholy page. For heaven in love dissolves the ties that chain the spirit here, and distant far forever flies the blessing held most dear. To bid the suffering soul aspire a higher bliss to prove, to wake the pure, refined desire, the hope that rests above. A hymn. While thee I seek, protecting power, be my vain wishes stilled, and may this consecrated hour with better hopes be filled. Thy love the powers of thought bestowed, to thee my thoughts would soar, thy mercy o'er my life has flowed, that mercy I adore. In each event of life, how clear thy ruling hand I see, each blessing to my soul more dear, because conferred by thee. In every joy that crowns my days, in every pain I bear, my heart shall find delight in praise, or seek relief in prayer. When gladness wings my favored hour, thy love my thoughts shall fill, resigned, when storms of sorrow lower, my soul shall meet thy will. My lifted eye without a tear the lowering storm shall see, my steadfast heart shall know no fear, that heart will rest on thee. Paraphrases from Scripture. The day is thine, the night also is thine, thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Thou hast set all the borders of the earth, thou hast made summer and winter. Psalm 74. 16-17. My God! All nature owns thy sway, thou giv'st the night, and now the day. When all thy loved creation wakes, when morning, rich in lustre breaks, and bathes in dew the opening flower, to thee we owe her fragrant hour, and when she pours her choral song, her melodies to thee belong. Or when, in paler tints arrayed, the evening slowly spreads her shade, that soothing shade, that grateful gloom, can more than days in livening bloom still every fond, and vain desire, and calmer, purer thoughts inspire, from earth the pensive spirit free, and lead the softened heart to thee. In every scene thy hands have drayest, in every form by thee impressed, upon the mountain's awful head, or where the sheltering woods are spread, in every note that swells the gale, or tuneful stream that cheers the vale, the cavern's depth, or echoing grove, a voice is heard of praise and love. As o'er thy work the seasons roll, and soothe with change of bliss the soul, O never may their smiling train pass o'er the human scene in vain. But oft as on the charm we gaze, attune the wondering soul to praise, and be the joys that most we prize, the joys that from thy favor rise. Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. Isaiah 49:15. Heaven speaks. O nature, listen and rejoice. O spread from pole to pole this gracious voice. Say every breast of human frame that proves the boundless force with which a parent loves. Say, can a mother from her yearning heart bid the soft image of her child depart? She, whom strong instinct arms with strength to bear all forms of ill, to shield that dearest care. She, who with anguish stung, with madness wild, will rush on death to save her threatened child. All selfish feelings banished from her breast, her life one aim to make another's blessed. When her vexed infant to her bosom clings, when round her neck his eager arms he flings, breathes to her listening soul his melting sigh, and lifts suffused with tears his asking eye, will she for all ambition can attain the charms of pleasure, or the lures of gain, betray strong nature's feelings, will she prove cold to the claims of duty and of love? But should the mother from her yearning heart bid the soft image of her child depart, when the vexed infant to her bosom clings, when round her neck his eager arms he flings, should she unpitying hear his melting sigh, and view unmoved the tear that fills his eye? Should she for all ambition can attain the charms of pleasure, or the lures of gain, betray strong nature's feelings, should she prove cold to the claims of duty and of love? Yet never will the God, whose word gave birth to yon illumined orbs and this fair earth, who through the boundless depths of trackless space bade new-wacked beauty spread each perfect grace, yet when he formed the vast stupendous whole, shed his best bounties on the human soul, which reason's light illumes, which friendship warms, which pity softens, and which virtue charms, which feels the pure affection's generous glow, shares others' joy, and bleeds for others' woe. Oh, never will the general Father prove of man forgetful, man the child of love, when all those planets in their ample spheres have winged their course, and rolled their destined years, when the vast sun shall veil his golden light deep in the gloom of everlasting night, when wild, destructive flames shall wrap the skies, when chaos triumphs, and when nature dies, man shall alone the wreck of worlds survive, midst falling spheres, immortal man shall live. The voice which bade the last dread thunders roll, shall whisper to the good, and cheer their soul. God shall himself his favored creature guide where living waters pour their blissful tide, where the enlarged, exulting, wondering mind shall soar, from weakness and from guilt refined, where perfect knowledge, bright with cloudless rays, shall gild eternity's unmeasured days, where friendship, unembittered by distrust, shall in immortal bands unite the just, devotion rise to rapture breathe her strain, and love in his eternal triumph reign. Whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Matt. 7:12. Precept divine. To earth and mercy given, O sacred rule of action, worthy heaven, whose pitying love ordained the blessed command to bind our nature in a firmer band, enforce each human sufferer's strong appeal, and teach the selfish breast what others feel. Wert thou the guide of life, mankind might know a soft exemption from the worst of woe. No more the powerful would the weak oppress, but tyrants learn the luxury to bless. No more would slavery bind a hopeless train of human victims in her galling chain. Mercy the hard, the cruel heart would move to soften misery by the deeds of Jove, and avarice from his hoarded treasures give unasked the liberal boon that want might live. The impious tongue of falsehood then would cease to blast, with dark suggestions, virtue's peace. No more would spleen or passion banish rest and plant a pang in fond affection's breast. By one harsh word, one altered look, destroy her peace, and wither every opening joy. Scarce can her tongue the captious wrong explain, the slight offense which gives so deep a pain. Affected ease that slights her starting tear, the words whose coldness kills from lips so dear. The hand she loves, alone can point the dart, whose hidden sting could wound no other heart. These, of all pains the sharpest we endure, the breast which now inflicts, would spring to cure. No more deserted genius then, would fly to breathe in solitude his hopeless sigh. No more would fortune's partial smile debase the spirit, rich in intellectual grace, who views unmoved from scenes where pleasures bloom, the flame of genius sunk in misery's gloom. The soul he then formed to soar, by want depressed, nor heeds the wrongs that pierce a kindred breast. Thou righteous law, whose clear and useful light sheds on the mind a ray divinely bright, condensing in one rule whatever the sage has proudly taught, in many a labored page. Bid every heart thy hallowed voice revere, to justice sacred, and to nature dear. End of the first volume. Poems by Helen Maria Williams. In 2 volumes. Volume 2. Of the second volume. An epistle to Dr. Moore, author of A View of Society and Manners in France, Switzerland, and Germany. Part of an irregular fragment, found in a dark passage of the Tower, Peru. Sonnet to Mrs. Siddons. Queen Mary's Complaint. Euphilia, an elegy. Sonnet to Expression. An epistle to Dr. Moore. Whether dispensing hope and ease to the pale victim of disease, or in the social crowd you sit, and charm the group with sense and wit, Moore's partial ear will not disdain attention to my artless strain. An epistle to Dr. Moore, author of A View of Society and Manners in France, Switzerland, and Germany. I mean no giddy heights to climb, and vainly toil to be sublime, while every line with labor wrought is swelled with tropes for want of thought. Nor shall I call the muse to shed Castalian drops upon my head, or send me from Parnassian bowers a chaplet wove of fancy's flowers. At present all such aid I slight, my heart instructs me how to write. That softer glide my hours along, that still my griefs are soothed by song, that still my careless numbers flow to your successful skill I owe, you, who in sickness o'er me hung, and languor had my lyre unstrung, with treasures of the healing art, with friendship's ardor at your heart, from sickness snatched her early prey and bade fair health, the goddess gay, with sprightly air, and winning grace, with laughing eye, and rosy face. Accustomed when you call to hear, on her light pinion hasten. Near, and swift restore with influence kind, my weakened frame, my drooping mind. With like benignity, and zeal, the mental malady to heal, to stop the fruitless, hopeless tear, the life you lengthened, render dear, to charm by fancy's powerful vein. The written troubles of the brain. From gayer scenes, compassion led your frequent footsteps to my shed, and knowing that the muse's art has power to ease an aching heart, you soothed that heart with partial praise, and I'd before too fond of lays, while others pant for solid gain, grasp at a laurel sprig, in vain, you could not. Chill with frown severe the madness to my soul so dear, for when Apollo came to store your mind with salutary lore, the god I ween, was pleased to dart a ray from Pindus on your heart, your willing bosom caught the fire, and still is partial to the lyre. But now from you at distance placked where Epping spreads a woody waste, though unrestrained my fancy flies, and views in air her fabrics rise, and paints with brighter bloom the flowers, bids dryads people all the bowers, and echoes speak from every hill, and naiads pour each little rill, and bands of sylphs with pride unfold their azure plumage mixed with gold, my heart remembers with a sigh that you are now no longer nigh. The magic scenes no more engage, I quit them for your various page, where, with delight I traverse o'er the foreign paths you trod before. Ah, not in vain those paths you tracked, with heart to feel, with powers to taste. Amid the ever-jocund train who sport upon the banks of Seine, in your light Frenchman pleased I see his nation's gay epitome, whose careless hours glide smooth along, who charms misfortune with a song. She comes not as on Albion's plain, with death and madness in her train, for here, her keenest sharpest dart may raise, but cannot pierce the heart. Yet he whose spirit light as air calls life a jest, and laughs at care, feels the strong force of pity's voice, and bids afflicted love rejoice. Love, such as fills the poet's page, love, such as formed the golden age. Fanchon, thy grateful look I see, I share thy joys, I weep with thee, what I has read without a tear, a tale to nature's heart so dear. There, dressed in each sublimer grace, Geneva's happy scene I trace, her lake, from whose broad bosom thrown rushes the loud impetuous Rhone, and bears his waves with mazy sweep in rapid torrents to the deep. Oh, for a muse less weak of wing, high on yon alpine steeps to spring, and tell in verse what they disclose as well as you have told in prose. How wrapped in snows and icy showers, eternal winter, horrid lowers upon the mountain's awful brow, while purple summer blooms below, how icy structures rear their forms, pale products of 10,000 storms, where the full sunbeam powerless falls on crystal arches, columns, walls, yet paints the proud fantastic height with all the various hues of light. Why is no poet called to birth in such a favored spot of earth? How high his Venrose muse might rise, and proudly scorn to ask supplies from the Parnassian hill, the fire of verse, Mont Blanc might well inspire. O Switzerland! How oft these eyes desire to view thy mountains rise, how fancy loves thy steeps to climb, so wild, so solemn, so sublime, and o'er thy happy valleys to roam, where freedom rears her humble home. Ah, how unlike each social grace which binds in love thy manly race, the Hollander's phlegmatic ease, too cold to love, too dull to please, who feel no sympathetic woe, nor sympathetic joy bestow, but fancy words are only made to serve the purposes of trade, and when they neither buy nor sell, think silence answers quite as well. Now in his happiest light is seen Voltaire, when evening chased his spleen, and placked at supper with his friends, the playful flash of wit descends. Of names renowned you clearly shew the finer traits we wish to know. To Prussia's martial clime I stray, and see how Frederick spends the day. Behold him rise at dawning light to form his troops for future fight. Through the firm ranks his glances pierce, where discipline, with aspect fierce, and unrelenting breast, is seen degrading man to a machine. My female heart delights to turn where greatness seems not quite so stern. Mild on th imperial brow she glows, and lives to soften human woes. But lo! On ocean's stormy breast I see majestic Venice rest, while round her spires the billows rave, inverted splendors gild the wave. Fair Liberty has reared with toil her fabric on this marshy soil. She fled those banks with scornful pride, where classic devolves her tide, yet here her unrelenting laws are deaf to nature's, freedom's cause. Unjust. They sealed Foscari's doom, an exile in his early bloom. And he, who bore the rack unmoved, divided far from those he loved, from all the social hour can give, from all that make it bliss to live, these worst of ills reefest to bear, and died, the victim of despair. An eye of wonder let me raise, while on imperial Rome I gaze. But oh! No more in glory bright she fills with aught astonished sight. Her mouldering fanes in ruin tract lie scattered on Campania's waste. Nor only these, alas! We find the wreck involves the human mind. The lords of earth now drag a chain beneath a pontiff's feeble reign. The soil that gave a Cato birth no longer yields heroic worth, whose image lives but on the bust, or consecrates the metal's rust. Yet if no heart of modern frame glows with the antant hero's flame, the dire arena's horrid stage is banished from this milder age. Those savage virtues too are fled at which the human feelings bled. While now at Virgil's tomb you bend, oh let me on your steps attend. Kneel on the turf that blossoms round, and kiss, with lips devout, the ground. I feel how oft his magic powers shed pleasure on my lonely hours. Though hid from me the classic tongue, in which his heave and a wise strain was sung, in Dryden's tuneful lines, I pierce the shaded beauties of his verse. Bright be the ripening beam, that shines fair Florence, on thy purple vines, and ever pure the fanning gale that pants in Arno's myrtle vale. Here, when the barbarous northern race, dire foes to every muse and grace, had doomed the banished arts to roam, the lovely wanderers found a home, and shed round Leo's triple crown unfading rays of bright renown. Whoe'er has felt his bosom glow with knowledge, or the wish to know, has e'er from books with transport caught the rich accession of a thought. Perceived with conscious pride, he feels the sentiment which taste reveals. Let all who joys like these possess thy veil, enchanting Florence bless. Oh, had the art's benignant light no more revived from Gothic night, earth had been one vast scene of strife, or one drear void had saddened life. Lost had been all the sage has taught, the painter's sketch, the poet's thought, the force of sense, the charm of wit, nor ever had your page been writ, that soothing page, which care beguiles, and dresses truth in fancy's smiles, for not with hostile step you pressed each foreign soil, a thankless guest. While travelers who want the skill to mark the shapes of good and ill, with vacant stare through Europe range, and deem all bad, because 'tis strange, through varying modes of life, you trace the finer trait, the latent grace, and where through every vain disguise you view the human follies rise, the stroke of irony you dart with force to mend, not wound the heart. While intellectual objects share your mind's extensive view, you bear, quite free from spleen's encumbering load, the little evils on the road. So, while the path of life I tread, a path to me with briars spread, let me its tangled mazes spy like you, with gay, good-humored eye, nor at those thorny tracks repine, the treasure of your friendship, mine. Grange Hill, Essex. Part of an irregular, transcriber's note, original, irregular, fragment, found in a dark passage of the Tower. Advertisement. The following poem is formed on a very singular and sublime idea. A young gentleman, possessed of an uncommon genius for drawing, on visiting the Tower of London, passing one door of a singular construction, asked what apartment it led to, and expressed a desire to have it opened. The person who shewed the place shook his head, and answered, "Heaven knows what is within that door, it has been shut for ages." This answer made small impression on the other hearers, but a very deep one on the imagination of this youth. Gracious heaven! An apartment shut up for ages, and in the Tower! Ye towers of Julius! London's lasting shame, by many a foul and midnight murder fed. Genius builds on a slight foundation, and rears beautiful structures on the baseless fabric of a vision. The above transient hint dwelt on the young man's fancy, and conjured into his memory all the murders which history records to have been committed in the Tower, Henry VI, the Duke of Clarence, the two young princes, sons of Edward IV, Sir Thomas Overbury, and c. He supposes all their ghosts assembled in this unexplored apartment, and to these his fertile imagination has added several others. One of the spectres raises an immense pall of black velvet, and discovers the remains of a murdered royal family, whose story is lost in the lapse of time. The gloomy wildness of these images struck my imagination so forcibly, that endeavoring to catch the fire of the youth's pencil, this fragment was produced. Part of an irregular fragment, found in a dark passage of the tower. I rise, winds of night. Relentless tempests rise. Rush from the troubled clouds, and o'er me roll. In this chill pause a deeper horror lies, a wilder fear appalls my shuddering soul. 'Twas on this day, this hour accursed, that nature starting from repose heard the dire shrieks of murder burst. From infant innocence they rose, and shook these solemn towers. I shuddering past that fatal room for ages wrapped in central gloom. I shuddering past that iron door which fate perchance unlocks no more. Death, smeared with blood, o'er the dark portal lowers. The anniversary of the murder of Edward V, and his brother Richard, Duke of York. 2. How fearfully my step resounds along these lonely bounds, spare, savage blast. The taper's quivering fires, deep in these gathering shades its flame expires. Ye host of heaven! The door recedes, it mocks my grasp, what unseen hands have burst its iron bands? No mortal force this gate unbarred where danger lives, which terrors guard, dread powers. Its screaming hinges close on this dire scene of impious deeds. My feet are fixed, dismay has bound my step on this polluted ground. But lo! The pitying moon, a line of light athwart the horrid darkness dimly throws, and from yon grated window chases night. 3. Ye visions that before me roll, that freeze my blood, that shake my soul. Are ye the phantoms of a dream? Pale spectres! Are ye what ye seem? They glide more near, their forms unfold. Fixed are their eyes, on me they bend, their glaring look is cold. And hark! I hear sounds that the throbbing pulse of life suspend. 4. No wild illusion cheats thy sight, with shapes that only live a night. Mark the native glories spread around my bleeding brow. The crown of Albion wreathed my head, and Gallia's lilies, twinned below. When my father shook his spear, when his banner sought the skies, her baffled hosts recoiled with fear, nor turned their shrinking eyes. Soon as the daring eagle springs, to bask in heaven's imperial light, the vultures ply their baleful wings. A cloud of deepening color marks their flight, staining the golden day. But see! Amid the ravenous brood, a bird of fiercer aspect soar. The spirits of a rival race, hang on the noxious blast and trace, with gloomy joy his destined prey. Inflame ambitious with that thirst for blood, and plunge his talons deep in kindred gore. Henry VI, crowned when an infant, at Paris. Richard III, by murdering so many near relations, seemed to revenge the sufferings of Henry VI and his family on the House of York. View the stern form that hovers nigh. Fierce rolls his dauntless eye, in scorn of hideous death, till starting at a brother's name, horror shrinks his glowing frame, locks the half-uttered groan, and chills the parting breath. Astonished nature heaved a moan, when her affrighted eye beheld the hands she formed to cherish, rend her holy bands. Richard III, who murdered his brother the Duke of Clarence. 6. Look where a royal infant, kneels, shrieking, and agonized with fear. He sees the dagger pointed near a much-loved brother's breast, and tells an absent mother all he feels. His eager eye he casts around. Where shall her guardian form be found? On which his eager eye would rest. On her he calls in accents wild, and wonders why her step is slow. To save her suffering child, robbed in the regal garb, his brother stands, in more majestic woe, and meets the impious stroke with bosom bare. Then fearless grasps the murderer's hands, and asks the minister of hell to spare the child whose feeble arms sustain his bleeding form from cruel death. In vain fraternal fondness pleads, for cold is now his livid cheek, and cold his last, expiring breath. And now with aspect meek, the infant lifts his mournful eye, and asks with trembling voice to die. If death will cure his heaving heart of pain, his heaving heart now bleeds. Fall, tyrant! O'er the gilded hour, that beams with all the blaze of power, remorse shall spread her thickest shroud. The Furies in thy tortured ear shall howl, with curses deep and loud, and wake distracting fear. I see the ghastly spectre rise, whose blood is cold, whose hollow eyes seem from his head to start. With upright hair and shivering heart, dark o'er thy midnight couch he bends, and clasps thy shrinking frame, thy impious spirit rends. A. Richard Duke of York. B. Edward V. 7. Now his thrilling accents die, his shape eludes my searching eye. But who is he, A. convulsed with pain, that writhes in every swelling vein? Yet in so deep, so wild a groan, a sharper anguish seems to live than life's expiring pang can give. He dies deserted, and alone. If pity can allay thy woe's sad spirit, they shall find repose. Thy friend, thy long-loved friend, is near. He comes to pour the parting tear, he comes to catch the parting breath. Ah, heaven! No melting look he wears, his altered eye with vengeance glares, each frantic passion at his soul. 'Tis he has dashed that venomed bowl with agony and death. A. Sir Thomas Overbury, poisoned in the Tower by Somerset. 8. But whence arose that solemn call? Yon bloody phantom waves his hand, and beckons me to deeper gloom. Rest, troubled form. I come, some unknown power my step impels to horror's secret cells. For thee I raise this sable pall. It shrouds a ghastly band. Stretched beneath, thy eye shall trace a mangled regal race. 1,000 suns have rolled since light rushed on their solid night. See, o'er that tender frame grim famine hangs, and mocks a mother's pangs. The last drop which warmed her veins, that meager infant drains. Then gnaws her fond, sustaining breast. Stretched on her feeble knees, behold, another victim sinks to lasting rest. Another, yet her matron arms would fold. Who strives to reach her matron arms in vain, too weak her wasted form to raise. On him she bends her eager gaze. She sees the soft, imploring eye that asks her dear embrace, the cure of pain. She sees her child at distance die. But now her steadfast heart can bear, unmoved, the pressure of despair. When first the winds of winter urge their course o'er the pure stream, whose current smoothly glides, the heaving river swells its troubled tides. But when the bitter blast with keener force o'er the high wave an icy fetter throws, the hardened wave is fixed in dead repose. 9. Say who that hoary form? Alone he stands, and meekly lifts his withered hands. His white beard streams with blood. I see him with a smile deride the wounds that pierce his shriveled side, whence flows a purple flood. But sudden pangs his bosom tear. On one big drop of deeper dye, I see him fix his haggard eye. In dark and wild despair, that sanguine drop which wakes his woe. Say, spirit, whence its source? Ask no more its source to know. Ne'er shall mortal eye explore whence flowed that drop of human gore, till the starting dead shall rise, unchained from earth, and mount the skies, and time shall end his fated course. Now th unfathomed depth behold. Look but once! A second glance wraps a heart of human mold in death's eternal trance. X. That shapeless phantom sinking slow, deep down the vast abyss below, darts through the mists that shroud his frame, a horror nature hates to name. Mortal, could thine eyes behold all those sullen mists enfold, thy sinews at the sight accursed would wither and thy heart's strings burst. Death would grasp with icy hand and drag thee to our grisly band. Away! The sable pall I spread, and give to rest th unquiet dead. Haste! Ere its horrid shroud enclose thy form, benumbed with wild affright, and plunge thee far through wastes of night, in yon black gulf's abhorred repose. As starting at each step I fly, wide backward turns my frantic eye, that closing portal past, two sullen shades half seen, advance, On me, a blasting look they cast, and fixed my view with Dangrous spells, where burning frenzy dwells, again. Their vengeful look, and now a speechless. Peru. A poem, in 6 cantos. To Mrs. Montague. While, bending at thy honored shrine, the muse pours, Montague, to thee her votive strain, thy heart will not her simple notes refuse, or chill her timid soul with cold disdain. O might a transient spark of genius fire the fond effusions of her fearful youth, then should thy virtues live upon her lyre, and give to harmony the charm of truth. Vain wish! They ask not the imperfect lay, the weak applause her trembling accents breathe, with whose pure radiance glory blends her ray, whom fame has circled with her fairest wreath. Thou, who while seen with graceful step to tread grandure's enchanted round, canst meekly pause to rend the veil obscurity had spread where his lone side deserted genius draws, to lead his drooping spirit to thy fane, where Attic joy the social circle warms, where science loves to pour her hallowed strain, where wit and wisdom blend their separate charms, and lure to cherish intellectual powers, to bid the vigorous tides of genius roll, unfold, in fair expansion, fancy's flowers, and wake the latent energies of soul. Far other homage claims than flattery brings the little triumphs of the proud to grace, for deeds like these a purer incense springs, warm from the swelling heart its source we trace. Yet not to foster the rich gifts of mind alone can all thy liberal cares employ, not to the few those gifts adorn, confined, they spread an ampler sphere of genuine joy. While pleasure's lucid star illumes thy bower, thy pity views the distant storm that bends where want unsheltered wastes the lingering hour, and meets the blessing that to heaven ascends. For this, while fame through each successive age on her exulting lip thy name shall breathe, while woman, pointing to thy finished page, claims from imperious man the critic wreath. Truth on her spotless record shall enroll each moral beauty to her spirit dear, paint in bright characters each grace of soul, while admiration pours a generous tear. Helen Maria Williams. London, April the 24th, 1784. Advertisement. That no readers of the following work may entertain expectations respecting it which it would ill satisfy, it is necessary to acquaint them that the author has not had the presumption even to attempt a full, historical narration of the fall of the Peruvian Empire. To describe that important event with accuracy, and to display with clearness and force the various causes which combined to produce it, would require all the energy of genius, and the most glowing colors of imagination. Conscious of her utter inability to execute such a design, she has only aimed at a simple detail of some few incidents that make up part of that romantic story, where the unparalleled sufferings of an innocent and amiable people form the most affecting subjects of true pathos, while their climate, totally unlike our own, furnishes new and ample materials for poetic description. The argument. General description of the country of Peru, and of its animal and vegetable productions, the virtues of the people, character of Adeliba, their monarch, his love for Alzira, their nuptials celebrated, character of Zorai, her father, descent of the genius of Peru, prediction of the fate of that empire. Peru. Canto the First. Where the Pacific deep in silence laves the western shore, with slow and languid waves, there, lost Peruvia, rose thy cultured scene, the wave and emblem of thy joy serene. There nature ever in luxuriant showers pours from her treasures, the perennial flowers. In its dark foliage plumbed, the towering pine ascends the mountain, at her call divine. The palm's wide leaf its brighter verdure spreads, and the proud cedars bow their lofty heads. Tend the citron, and the glowing orange spring, and on the gale a thousand odors fling, the guava, and the soft ananas bloom, the balsam ever drops a rich perfume, the bark, reviving shrub. O not in vain 15 thy rosy blossoms tinge Peruvia's plain, ye fostering gales, around those blossoms blow, ye balmy dewdrops, o'er the tendrils flow. Lo, as the health-diffusing plant aspires, disease, and pain, and age-overing death retires, 20 affection sees new luster light the eye, and feels her vanished joys again are nigh. The pacos, A, and vicunas, B, sport around, and the meek llamas, C, burdened, press the ground. Amid the vocal groves, the feathered throng 25 pour to the listening breeze their native song. The mocking bird her varying note essays, the vain macaw his glittering plume displays. While spring's warm ray the mild suffusion sheds, the plaintive humming bird his pinions spreads. 30 his wings their colors to the sun unfold, the vivid scarlet, and the blazing gold. He sees the flower which morning tears bedew, sinks on its breast, and drinks ambrosial dew, then seeks with fond delight the social nest 35 parental care has reared, and love has blessed, the drops that on the blossom's light leaf hung. He bears exulting to his tender young, the grateful joy his happy accents prove, is nature, smiling on her works of love. 40. Nor less, Peruvia, for thy favored clime the virtues rose, unsullied, and sublime, their melting charity, with ardor warm, spread her wide mantle o'er unsheltered form, cheered with the festal song, her liberal toils, 45 while in the lap of age, she poured the spoils. Simplicity in every vale was found, the meek nymphs milled, with reeds and rushes crowned, and innocence in light, transparent vest, mild visitant. The gentle region blessed, 50 as from her lip enchanting accents part, they thrill with pleasure the responsive heart, and o'er the ever-blooming valleys around, soft echoes waft each undulating sound. This happy region Adelaiba swayed, 55 whose mild behest the willing heart obeyed, descendant of a sceptred, sacred race, whose origin from glowing suns they trace, and as o'er nature's form, the solar light diffuses beauty, and inspires delight. 60 so, o'er Peruvia flowed the liberal ray of mercy, lovelier than the smile of day. In Adelaiba's pure and generous heart the virtues bloomed without the aid of art. His gentle spirit, love's soft power posseused, 65 and stamped Alzira's image on his breast. Alzira, formed each tenderness to prove, that sooths in friendship, and that charms in love. But in vain the drooping muse would paint, her accents languid, and her colors faint. 70 how dear the joys love's early wishes sought, how mild his spirit, and how pure his thought, ere wealth in sullen pomp was seen to rise, and break the artless bosom's holy ties. Blast with his touch affection's opening flower, 75 and chill the hand that reared her blissful bower. Fortune, light nymph, still bless the sordid heart, still to thy venal slave thy gifts impart. Bright in his view may all thy meteors shine, and lost Peruvia open every mine. 80 for him the robe of eastern pomp display, the gems that ripen in the torrid ray. Collected may their guilty luster stream full on the eye that courts the partial beam. But love, O love, should haply this late hour, 85 one softer mind avow thy genuine power, breathe at thy altar nature's simple strain, and strew the heart's pure incense on thy fane. Give to that bosom scorning fortune's toys, thy sweet enchantments, and thy virtuous joys. 90 bid pleasure bloom through many a circling year, which love shall wing, and constancy endear. Far from this happy clime avert the woes, the heart from alienated fondness knows. And from that agony the spirit save. 95 when unrelenting yawns the opening grave, when death dissolves the ties forever dear, when frantic passion pours her parting tear. With all the cherished pains affection feels, hangs on the quivering lip, that silence seals. 100 views fondness struggling in the closing eye, and marks it mingling in the faltering sigh, as the loved form, while folded to her breast, on earth's cold bosom seeks more lasting rest. Leave her fond soul in hopeless griefs to mourn. 105 clasp the pale corse, and bathe unconscious urn. Mild, to the wounds that pierce her bleeding heart, nature's expiring pang, and death's keen dart. Pure was the luster of the orient ray, that joyful wacked Alzira's nuptial day. 110 her auburn hair, spread loosely to the wind, the virgin train, with rosy chaplets bind. The scented flowers that form her bridal wreath, a deeper hue, a richer fragrance breathe. The gentle tribe now sought the hallowed fane. 115 where warbling vestals poured the choral strain. Their aged Zori, his Alzira pressed with love parental, to his anxious breast, priest of the sun, within the sacred shrine his fervent spirit breathed the strain divine. 120 with glowing hand, the guiltless offering spread, with pious zeal the pure libation shed. Nor vain the incense of erroneous praise when meek devotion soul the tribute pays. On wings of purity behold it rise, 125 while bending mercy wafts it to the skies. Peru via! O delightful land, in vain the virtues flourished on thy beauteous plain, in vain sweet pleasure there was seen to move, and wore the smile of peace, the bloom of love. 130 For soon shall burst the unrelenting storm, rend her soft robe, and crush her tender form. Peru via! Soon the fatal hour shall rise, the hour despair shall waste in tears and sighs. Fame shall record the horrors of thy fate. 135 And distant ages weep for ills so great. Now o'er the deep chill night her mantle flung, dim on the wave the moon's faint crescent hung. Peruvia's genius sought the liquid plain, soothed by the languid murmurs of the main. 140 When sudden clamor the illusion broke, wild on the surface of the deep it spoke. A rising breeze expands her flowing veil, aghast with fear, she spied a flying sail. The lofty mast impends, the banner waves. 145 The ruffled surge incumbent vessel laves. With eager eye he views her destined foe lead to her peaceful shores. Advent rouse prow, trembling she knelt, with wild disordered air, and poured with frantic energy her prayer. 150 O ye avenging spirits of the deep! Mount the blue lightning's wing, o'er ocean sweep. Loud from your central caves the shell resound, that summons death to your abyss profound. Call the pale spectre from his dark abode. 155 To print the billow, swell the blackening flood. Rush o'er the waves, the roughening deep deform. Howl in the blast, and animate the storm. Relentless powers! For not one quivering breeze has ruffled yet the surface of the seas. 160 Swift from your rocky steeps, ye condors, ye stray. Wave your black plumes, and cleave aerial way. Proud in terrific force, your wings expand. Press the firm earth, and darken all the strand. Bid the stern foe retire with wild affright. 170 And shun the region veiled in partial night. Vain hope, devoted land! I read thy doom. My sad prophetic soul can pierce the gloom. I see my loved, my favorite clime, consumed, and fading in its early prime. 175 But not in vain the beauteous realm shall bleed. Too late shall Europe's race deplore the deed. Region abhorred! Behold the tempting bane, the curse that desolates thy hostile plain. May pleasure tinge with venom drops the bowl. 180 And luxury unnerve the sickening soul. Ah, not in vain she poured impassioned tear. Ah, not in vain she called the powers to hear. When born from lost Peruvia's bleeding land, the guilty treasures beamed on Europe's strand. 185 Each sweet affection fled the tainted shore, and virtue wandered, to return no more. A. The Pacos is a domestic animal of Peru. Its wool resembles the color of dried roses. B. The vicunas are a species of wild Pacos. C. The llamas are employed as mules, in carrying burdens. D. The people cheerfully assisted in reaping those fields, whose produce was given to old persons, past their labor. E. The condor is an inhabitant of the Andes. Its wings, when expanded, are said to be 18 feet wide. F. Transcriber's note, misnumbered in original. Peru. Canto II. The argument. Pizarro, a Spanish captain, lands with his forces. His meeting with Adelaiba. Its unhappy consequences. Zoraide dies, Adelaiba imprisoned and strangled. Alzira's despair and madness. Peru. Canto II. Flushed with impatient hope, the martial band by stern Pizarro led, approached the land. No terrors armed the hostile brow, for guile charms to betray, in candor's open smile. Too artless for distrust, the monarch springs 5 to meet his latent foe on friendship's wings. On as he moves, with glittering splendors crowned, his feathered chiefs the golden throne surround. The waving canopy its plume displays, whose varied hues reflect the morning rays. 10 With native grace he hails the warrior train, who stood majestic on Peruvia's plain, in all the savage pomp of armor drayest, the radiant helmet, and the nodding crest. Yet themes of joy Pizarro's lips impart. 15 And charm with eloquence the simple heart, unfolding to the monarch's wondering thought all that inventive arts the rude have taught. And now he bids the pure spirit rise above the circle of surrounding skies. 20 presents the page that shed religion's light o'er the dark mist of intellectual night. While thrilled with awe the monarch trembling stands, he dropped the hallowed volume from his hands. Sudden, while frantic zeal each breast inspires, 25 and shuddering demons fan the impious fires, the bloody signal waves, the banners play, the naked sabers flash their streaming ray, the martial trumpets animating sound, and thundering cannon, rend the vault around. 30 while fierce and sanguine rage the sons of Spain rush on Peru's unarmed, devoted train, the fiends of slaughter urged their dire career. And virtue's guardian spirits dropped a tear. Mild Zorai fell, deploring human strife. 35 and clossed with prayer his consecrated life. In vain Peruvia's chiefs undaunted stood, shield their loved prince, and bathe his robes in blood, touched with heroic ardor, rush around, and high of soul, receive each fatal wound. 40 dragged from his throne, and hurried o'er the plain, the wretched monarch swells the captive train. With iron grasp, the frantic prince they bear, and bless the omen of his wild despair. Deep in the gloomy dungeon's lone domain, 45 lost Adeliba wore the galling chain. The earth's cold bed reefest oblivious rest, while throb the pains of thousands at his breast. Alzira's desolating moan he hears, and with the monarch's blends the lover's tears. 50 soon had Alzira felt affliction's dart pierce her soft soul, and rend her bleeding heart, its quick pulsations paused, and chilled with dread. A livid hue her fading cheek o'erspread. No tear she gave to love, she breathed no sigh. 55 her lips were mute, and clossed her languid eye. Fainter, and slower heaved her shivering breast, and her calm passion seemed in death to rest. At length revived, mid rising heaps of slain she pressed with trembling step, the crimson plain. 60 the dungeon's gloomy depths she fearless sought, for love, with scorn of danger armed her thought. The cell that holds her captive lord she gains, her tears fall quivering on a lover's chains. Too tender spirit, check the filial tear. 65 a sympathy more soft, a time more dear shall claim the drops that frantic passion sheds, when the rude storm its darkest pinions spreads. Lo! Bursting the deep cell where misery lay, the human vulture seized the dove-like prey. 70 in vain her treasured wealth Peruvia gave, this dearer treasure from their grasp to save. Alzira! Lo, the ruthless murderers come, this moment seals thy Adeliba's doom. Ah, what avails the shriek that anguish pours? 75 the look, that mercy's lenient aid implores. Torn from thy clinging arms, thy throbbing breast, the fatal cord his agony suppressed. In vain the livid corse she fondly clasps, and pours her sorrows o'er the form she grasps. 80 the murderers now their struggling victim tear from the lost object of her keen despair. The swelling pang unable to sustain, distraction throbbed in every beating vein, its sudden tumults seize her yielding soul. 85 and in her eye distempered glances roll. They come! The mourner cried, with panting breath, to give the lost Alzira rest in death. One moment more, ye bloody forms, bestow. One moment more forever cures my woe. 90. Lo, where the purple evening sheds her light on blessed remains. Oh, hide them, pitying night. Slow in the breeze I see the verdure wave, that shrouds with tufted grass my lover's grave. There, on its wandering wing in mildness blows 95. The mournful gale, nor wakes his deep repose. And see, yon hoary form still lingers there, disheveled by rude winds his silver hair. O'er his chilled bosom falls the winter's rain. I feel the big drops on my withered brain. 100. Not for himself that tear his bosom steeps, for his lost child it flows, for me he weeps. No more the dagger's point shall pierce thy breast, for calm and lovely is thy silent rest. Yet still in dust these eyes shall see thee roll. 105. Still the sad thought shall waste Alzira's soul. What bleeding phantom moves along the storm? It is my lover's well-known form. Though the dim moon is veiled, his robes of light tinge the dark clouds, and gild the mist of night. 110. Approach! Alzira's breast no terrors move. Her fears are all forever lost in love. Safe on the hanging cliff I now can rest, and press its pointed pillow to my breast. He weeps. In heaven he weeps. I feel his tear. 115. It chills my trembling heart, yet still 'tis dear. To him all joyless are the realms above. That pale look speaks of pity, and of love. My love ascends. He soars in azure light. Stay, tender spirit, cruel! Stay thy flight. 120. Again descend in yonder rolling cloud, and veil Alzira in thy misty shroud. He comes. My love has placked the dagger near, and on its hallowed point has dropped a tear. As rolled her wandering glances wide around 125, she snatched a reeking saber from the ground. Firmly her lifted hand the weapon pressed, and deep she plunged it in her panting breast. 'Tis but a few short moments that divide Alzira from her love, she said, and died. 130. A sudden, while frantic zeal, and c. Pizarro, who during a long conference had with difficulty restrained his soldiers, eager to seize the rich spoils of which they had now so near a view, immediately gave the signal of assault. At once the martial music struck up, the cannon and muskets began to fire, the horse sallied out fiercely to the charge, the infantry rushed on sword in hand. The Peruvians, astonished at the suddenness of an attack which they did not expect, and dismayed with the destructive effects of the firearms, fled with universal consternation on every side. Pizarro, at the head of his chosen band, advanced directly towards the Inca, and though his nobles crowded around him with officious zeal, and fell in numbers at his feet, while they vied one with another in sacrificing their own lives, that they might cover the sacred person of their sovereign, the Spaniards soon penetrated to the royal seat, and Pizarro, seizing the Inca by the arm, dragged him to the ground, and carried him a prisoner to his quarters. Robertson's History of America. Peru. Canto III. The Argument. Pizarro takes possession of Cuzco, the fanaticism of Valverde, a Spanish priest, its dreadful effects, a Peruvian priest put to the torture, his daughter's distress, he is rescued by Las Casas, an amiable Spanish ecclesiastic, and led to a place of safety, where he dies, his daughter's narration of her sufferings, her death. Peru. Canto III. Now stern Pizarro seeks the distant plains, where beauteous Cusco lifts her golden fanes. The meek Peruvians gazed in pale dismay, nor barred the dark oppressor's sanguine way. And soon on Cusco, where the dawning light five of glory shone, foretelling day more bright, where the young arts had shed unfolding flowers, a scene of spreading desolation lowers. While buried deep in everlasting shade, those lustres sicken, and those blossoms fade. 10 And yet, devoted land, not gold alone, or wild ambition whack thy parting groan, for, lo! A fiercer fiend, with joy elate, feasts on thy sufferings, and impels thy fate. Fanatic fury rears her sullen shrine, 15 Where vultures prey, where venomed adders twine. Her savage arm with purple torrents stains thy rocking temples, and thy falling fanes. Her blazing torches flash the mounting fire, she grasps the saber, and she lights the pyre. 20 Her voice is thunder, rending the still air, her glance the livid lightning's fatal glare. Her lips unhallowed breathe their impious strain, and pure religion's sacred voice profane, whose precepts, pity's mildest deeds, approve. 25 Whose law is mercy, and whose soul is love. Fanatic fury wakes the rising storm, she wears the stern Valverde's hideous form. His bosom never felt another's woes, no shriek of anguish breaks its dark repose. 30 The temple nods, an aged form appears, he beats his breast, he rends his silver hairs. Valverde drags him from the blessed abode where his meek spirit humbly sought its God. See, to his aid his child, soft Cilia, springs. 35 And steeps in tears the robe to which she clings, till bursting from Peruvia's fright throng, 2 Warlike youths impetuous rushed along. 1 Grasped his twanging bow with furious air, while in his troubled eye sat fierce despair. 40 But all in vain his erring weapon flies, pierced by 1,000 wounds, on earth he lies. His drooping head the heart-struck Zilia rised, and on the youth in speechless anguish gazed, while he, who fondly shared his danger, flew. 45 And from his breast a reeking saber drew. Deep in my faithful bosom let me hide the fatal steel, that would our souls divide. He quick exclaims, the dying warrior cries, ah, yet forbear, by all the sacred ties. 50 That bind our hearts, forbear. In vain he spoke, friendship with frantic zeal impels the stroke. Thyself forever lost, thou hopst in vain. The youth replied, my spirit to detain. From thee, my soul, in childhood's earliest year, 55, caught the light pleasure and the starting tear. Thy friendship then, my young affections blessed, the first pure passion of my infant breast. That passion, which o'er life delight has shed, by reason cherished, and by virtue fed, 60. And still in death I feel its strong control. Its sacred impulse wings my fleeting soul. That only lingers here till thou depart, whose image lives upon my fainting heart. In vain the generous youth, with panting breath, 65, poured these lost murmurs in the ear of death. He reads the fatal truth in Zilia's eye, and gives to friendship his expiring sigh. But now with rage Valverda's glances roll, and mark the vengeance rankling in his soul. 70, he bends his wrinkled brow, his lips impart the brooding purpose of his venomed heart. He bids the hoary priest in muttered strains abjure his faith, forsake his falling fanes, while yet the lingering pangs of torture wait. 75, while yet Valverda's power suspends his fate. Vain man, the victim cried, to hoary years. No death is mild, and virtue feels no fears. Cruel of spirit, come! Let tortures prove the power I served in life, in death I love. 80, he seized, with rugged cords his limbs they bound, and dragged the aged sufferer on the ground. They grasp his feeble form, his tresses tear, his robe they rend, his shriveled bosom bare. Ah, see his uncomplaining soul sustain. 85, the sting of insult, and the dart of pain. His steadfast spirit feels one pang alone. A child's despair awakes one suffering groan. The mourner kneels to catch his parting breath, to soothe the agony of lingering death. 90, no moan she breath, no tear had power to flow. Still on her lip expired th unuttered woe. Yet her livid cheek, her steadfast look, the desolated soul's deep anguish spoke. Mild victim, close not yet thy languid eyes. 95, pure spirit, claim not yet thy kindred skies. A pitying angel comes to stay thy flight. Las Casas, bids thee view returning light. Ah, let that sacred drop to virtue dear efface thy wrongs, receive his precious tear. 100, see his flushed cheek with indignation glow, while from his lips the tones of pity flow. O suffering Lord, he cried, whose streaming blood was poured for man, earth drank the sacred flood, whose mercy in the mortal pang forgave. 105. The murderous band thy love alone could save. Forgive, thy goodness burst each narrow bound, which feeble thought and human hopes surround. Forgive the guilty wretch, whose impious hand from thy pure altar flings the flaming brand. 110. In human blood that hallowed altar steeps libation dire, while groaning nature weeps. The limits of thy mercy dares to scan the object of thy love, his victim man. While yet I linger, lo, the sufferer dies. 115. I see his frame convulsed, I hear his sighs. Whoe'er controls the purpose of my heart, first in this breast shall plunge his guilty dart. With anxious step he flew, with eager hands he broke the fetters, burst the cruel bands. 120. As the fallen angel heard with awful fear the cherub's grave rebuke, in grace severe, and fled, while horror plumbed his impious crest. The form of virtue, as she stood confused, so fierce Valverda sullen moved along. 125. Abashed, and followed by the guilty throng. At length the hoary victim, freed from chains, Las Casas gently leads to safer plains. Soft Zilia's yielding soul the joy oppressed, she bathed with floods of tears her father's breast. 130. Las Casas now explores a secret cave whose shaggy sides the languid billows lave. Their rest secure, he cried, the Christian God will hover near, will guard the lone abode. Off to the gloomy cell his steps repair. 135. While night's chill breezes wave his silvered hair, oft in the tones of love, the words of peace, he bids the bitter tears of anguish cease, bids drooping hope uplift her languid eyes, and points a dearer bliss beyond the skies. 140. Yet in vain his pious cares would save the hoary sufferer from the opening grave, for deep the pangs of torture pierced his frame, and sunk his wasted life's expiring flame. To his cold lip Las Casas' hand he pressed. 145. He faintly clasped his Zilia to his breast, then cried, the God, whom now my vows adore, My heart through life obeyed, unknowing more. His mild forgiveness then my soul shall prove. His mercy's share, Las Casas God, is love. 150 He spoke no more. His Zilia's frantic moan was heard responsive to his dying groan. Victim of impious zeal, Las Casas cries. Accept departed shade, a Christian sighs. And now, soft mourner, tender, drooping form, 155. What power shall guard thee from the fearful storm? Weep not for me, she cried, for Zilia's breast soon in the sheltering earth shall find its rest. Hope not the victim of despair to save. I ask but death, I only seek a grave. 160. Witness thou mangled form that earth retains. Witness a murdered lover's cold remains. I lived my father's pangs to soothe, to share. I bore to live, though life was all despair. In vain my lover yarged by fond desire. 165. To shield from torture, and from death my sire flew to the fane where stern velvet aragged, and fearless, with unequal force engagged. I saw him bleeding, dying, press the ground. I drew the poison from each fatal wound. 170. I bathed those wounds with tears, he poured a sigh. A drop hung trembling in his closing eye. Ah, still his mournful sign I shivering hear. In every pulse I feel his parting tear. I faint, an icy coldness chills each vein. 175. No more these feeble limbs their load sustain. Spirit of pity, catch my fleeting breath. A moment stay, and close my eyes in death. Las Casas, thee, thy God in mercy gave, to soothe my pangs, to find the wretched grave. 180 She ceased, her spirit fled to purer spheres. Las Casas bathes the pallid corse with tears. Fly, minister of good, nor lingering shed those fruitless sorrows o'er the unconscious dead. Ah, fly, 'tis innocence, 'tis virtue bleeds. 185 And heaven will listen, when an angel pleads. I view the sanguine flood, the wasting flame, I hear a suffering world Las Casas claim. 188. Las Casas, and see, that amiable ecclesiastic, who obtained by his humanity the title of Protector of the Indies. B. On his crest sat horror plumbed. Par. Los. 4. 988. Peru. Canto the 4th. The argument. Almagro's expedition to Chile. His troops suffer great hardships from cold. In crossing the Andes, they reach Chile. The Chiles make a brave resistance. The revolt of the Peruvians in Cuzco. They are led on by Manco Capac, the successor of Adelaiba. His parting with Cora, his wife. The Peruvians regain half their city. Almagro leaves Chile. To avoid the Andes, he crosses a vast desert. His troops can find no water. The rest divide in two bands. Alfonso leads the second band, which soon reaches a fertile valley. The Spaniards observe the natives are employed in searching the streams for gold. They resolve to attack them. Peru. Canto the 4th. Now the stern partner of Pizarro's toils, Almagro, led by hope of golden spoils, to distant Chile's ever-verdant meads, through paths untrod, a band of warriors leads. O'er the high Andes' frozen steeps they go, 5 and wander mid eternal hills of snow. In vain the vivifying orb of day darts on impervious ice his fervent ray. Cold, keen as chains the oceans of the pole, numbs the shrunk frame, and chills the vigorous soul. 10 At length they reach luxuriant Chile's plain, where ends the dreary bound of winter's reign, where spring sheds odors through unvaried year, and bathes the flower of summer with her tear. When first the brave Chiles, with eager glance, 15 behold the hostile sons of Spain advance, heard the loud thunder of the cannon crash, and viewed the lightning of the instant flash, the threatening saber red with purple streams, the lance that quivered in the solar beams. 20 With pale surprise they saw the lowering storm, where hung dark danger, in an unknown form. But soon their spirits, stung with generous shame, renounce each terror, and for vengeance flame, pant high with sacred freedom's ardent glow. 25 And met intrepid, the superior foe. Long unsubdued by stern Almagro's train, their valiant tribes unequal fight maintain. Long victory hovered doubtful o'er the field, and oft she forked Iberia's band to yield. 30 Oft tore from Spain's proud head her laurel bough, and bade it blossom on Peruvia's brow, when sudden tidings reached Almagro's ear that shook the warrior's soul with doubt and fear. Of murdered Adeliba's royal race 35 there yet remained a youth of blooming grace, who pinned, the captive of relentless Spain, and long in Cusco dragged her galling chain. Capac his name, whose soul indignant bears the rankling fetters, and revenge prepares. 40 But since his daring spirit must forego the hope to rush upon the tyrant foe, led by his parent orb, that gives the day, and fierce as darts the keen, meridian ray, he vows to bend unseen his hostile course. 45 Then on the victor's rise with latent force, as sudden from its cloud the brooding storm, bursts in the thunder's voice, the lightning's form. For this, from stern Pizarro he obtains the boon, enlarged, to seek the neighboring plains, 50 for one blessed day, and with his friends unite. To crown with solemn pomp and ancient rite, share the dear pleasures of the social hour, and mid their fetters twine one festal flower. So spoke the prince. Far other thoughts posseist, 55 Far other purpose animates his breast, for now Peruvia's nobles he commands to lead, with silent step, her martial bands forth to the destined spot, prepared to dare the fiercest shock of dire, unequal war. 60 While every tender, human interest pleads, and urges the firm soul to lofty deeds. Now Capac hailed th eventful morning's light, rose with its dawn, and panted for the fight. But first with fondness to his heart he pressed 65 the tender Cora, partner of his breast, who with her lord, had sought the dungeon's gloom, and wasted there in grief, her early bloom. No more, he cried, no more my love shall feel the mingled agonies I fly to heal. 70 I go, but soon exulting shall return, and bid my faithful Cora cease to mourn. For oh, amid each pang my bosom knows, what wastes, what wounds it most, are Cora's woes. Sweet was the love that crowned our happier hours. 75 And shed new fragrance o'er a path of flowers. But sure divided sorrow more endears the tie, that passion seals with mutual tears. He paused, fast-flowing drops bedewed her eyes, while thus in mournful accents she replies. 80 Still let me feel the pressure of thy chain, still share the fetters which my love detain. Those piercing irons to my soul are dear, nor will the sharpness wound while thou art near. Oh, think not, when in thee alone I live. 85 This breast can bear the pain thy dangers give. Look on our helpless babe in misery nursed. My child, thy mother's heart will burst. Methinks I see the raging battle rise, and hear this harmless sufferer's feeble cries. 90 I view the blades that pour a sanguine flood, and plunge their cruel edge in infant blood. She could no more, her faltering accents die, yet her soul spoke expressive in her eye. Her lord beholds her grief, with tender pain. 95 And leads her breathless, to a sheltering fane. Now high in air his feathered standard waves, and soon from shrouding woods, and hollow caves, a number-roused host along the plain appear, and hail their monarch with a gen-roused terror. 100 To Cusco's gate now rush th increasing throngs, and such their ardor, roused by sense of wrongs, that vainly would Pizarro's veteran force arrest the torrent in its raging course. In vain his murdering bands terrific stood. 105 And plunged their sabers in a sea of blood, danger and death Peruvia's sons disdain, and half their captive city soon regain. With such pure joy the natives view their lord to the warm wishes of their souls restored. 110 As feels the tender child whom force had torn from his loved home, and bruised the flower of morn, when his fond searching eye again beholds his mother's form, when in her arms she folds the long-lost child, who bathes with tears her face, and finds his safety in her dear embrace. Soon as Almagro heard applauding fame 115 The triumphs of Peruvia, loud proclaim, unconquered Chile's vale he swift forsakes, and his bold course to distant Cusco takes, shuns Andes' icy shower, its chilling snows, the arrowy gale that on its summit blows. 120 A burning desert undismayed he passed, and meets the ardors of the fiery blast. Now as along the sultry waste they move, the keenest pang of raging thirst they prove, no cooling fruit its grateful juice distills. 125 Nor flows one balmy drop from crystal rills, for nature sickens in th oppressive beam, that shrinks the vernal bud, and dries the stream, while horror, as his giant stature grows, o'er the drear void his spreading shadow throws. 130. Almagro's band now pale, and fainting stray, while death oft barred the sinking warrior's way. At length the chief divides his martial force, and bids Alfonso, by a separate course, lead o'er the hideous desert half his train. 135. And search, he cried, this drear, uncultured plain. Perchance some fruitage withering in the breeze the pains of lessened numbers may appease, or even in pity, from some genial shower, on the parched lip one precious drop may pour. 140. Not far the troops of young Alfonso went, when sudden, from a rising hill's ascent, they view a valley, fed by fertile springs, which Andes from his lofty summit flings, where summer's flowers their mingled odors shed. 145. And wildly bloom, a waste by beauty spread, to the charmed warrior's eye, the vernal scene that mid the howling desert, smiled serene, appeared like nature rising from the breast of chaos, in her infant graces drayest. 150. When warbling angels hailed the lovely birth, and stooped from heaven to bless the new-born earth. And now Alfonso, and his martial band, on the rich border of the valley stand. They quaff the limpid stream with eager haste. 155. And the pure juice that swells the fruitage taste. Then give to balmy rest the night's still hours, fanned by the sighing gale that shuts the flowers. Soon as the purple beam of morning glows, refreshed from all their toils, the warriors rose. 160. And saw the gentle natives of the mead search the clear currents for the golden seed, which from the mountain's height with headlong sweep the torrents bear, in many a shining heap. Iberia's sons beheld with anxious brow. 165. The tempting lure. Then breathed th unpitying vow o'er those fair lawns to pour a sanguine flood, and dye those lucid streams with waves of blood. Thus, while the humming bird in beauty drayest, enchanting offspring of the ardent west, 170 attunes his soothing song to notes of love, mild as the murmurs of the morning dove, while his soft plumage glows with brighter hues, and while with tender bill he sips the dews, the savage condor, on terrific wings, 175 from Andes' frozen steep relentless springs, and quivering in his fangs, his hapless prey drops his gay plume, and sighs his soul away. 178. Peru. Canto the 5th. The argument. Character of Zamor, a bard, his passion for Asilo, daughter of the cacique who rules the valley. The Peruvian tribe prepare to defend themselves. A battle. The Peruvians are vanquished. Asilo's father is made a prisoner, and Zamor is supposed to have fallen in the engagement. Alfonso becomes enamored of Asilo, offers to marry her. She rejects him. In revenge, he puts her father to the torture. She appears to consent. In order to save him, meets Zamor in a wood. Las Casas joins them, leads the two lovers to Alfonso, and obtains their freedom. Zamor conducts Asilo and her father to Chile, a reflection on the influence of poetry over the human mind. Peru. Canto the 5th. In this sweet scene, to all the virtues kind, mild Zamor owned the richest gifts of mind, for o'er his tuneful breast the heave and ly muse shed from her sacred spring, inspiring dews. She loves to breathe her hallowed flame, where art 5 has never veiled the soul, or warped the heart, where fancy glows with all her native fire, and passion lives on the exulting lyre. Nature, in terror robbed, or beauty drayest, could thrill with dear enchantment Zamor's breast. 10 He loved the languid sigh the zephyr pours, he loved the murmuring rill that fed the flowers. But more the hollow sound the wild winds form, when black upon the billow hangs the storm, the torrent rolling from the mountain steep. 15 Its white foam trembling on the darkened deep, and oft on Andes' height with eager gaze he viewed the sinking sun's reflected rays glow like unnumbered stars that seem to rest sublime upon his ice-encircled breast. 20 Oft his wild warblings charmed the festal hour, rose in the vale, and languished in the bower. The heart's responsive tones he well could move, whose song was nature, and whose theme was love. Asilo's beauties his fond eye confused. 25 Yet more Asilo's virtues warmed his breast. Ah, stay, ye tender hours of young delight, suspend ye moments your impatient flight. For sure, if aught on earth can bliss impart, can shed the genuine joy that soothes the heart, 30 'Tis felt, when early passion's pure control unfolds the first affections of the soul, bids her soft sympathies the bosom move, and wakes the mild emotions dear to love. The gentle tribe Asilo's sire obeyed 35, who still in wisdom and in mercy swayed. From him the dear illusions long had fled, that o'er the morn of life enchantment shed, yet virtue's calm reflections cheered his breast, and life was joy serene, and death was rest. 40, though sweet the early spring, her blossoms bright, when first she swells the heart with pure delight, yet not unlovely is the sober ray that meekly beams o'er autumn's tempered day. Dear are her fading beauties to the soul. 45, while scarce perceived the deepening shadows roll. Now the charmed lovers dress their future years in forms of joy, then weep delicious tears, expressive on the glowing cheek that hung, and spoke the fine emotions whence they sprung. 50, 'twas truth's warm energy, love's sweet control, 'twas all that virtue whispers to the soul. When lo, Iberia's ruthless sons advance, roll the stern eye, and shake the pointed lance. O Nature! The destroying band oppose. 55, Nature! Arrest their course, they come thy foes. Benignant Power! Where thou with liberal care hast planted joy, they come to plant despair. Peruvia's tribe beheld the hostile throng with desolating fury pour along. 60, with horror their ensanguined path they tracked, and now to meet the murdering band they haste. The hoary chief to the dire conflict leads his death-devoted train. The battle bleeds. Asilo's searching eye can now no more 65 the form of Zamor, or her sire explore. She hears the moan of death in every gale, she sees a purple torrent stain the vale, while destined all the bitterness to prove of mourning duty, and of bleeding love. 70, each name that's dearest wakes her bursting sigh, throbs at her soul, and trembles in her eye. Now, pierced by wounds, and breathless from the fight, her friend, the valiant Omar, struck her sight. Omar, she cried, you bleed, unhappy youth. 75. And sure that look unfolds some fatal truth. Speak, pitying speak, my frantic fears forgive. Say, does my father, does my Zamor live? All is lost, the dying Omar said. And endless griefs are thine, dear wretched maid. 80. I saw thy aged sire a captive bound. I saw thy Zamor press the crimson ground. He could no more, he yields his fleeting breath, while all in vain she seeks repose in death. But oh, how far each other pang above. 85, throbs the wild agony of hopeless love, that grief, for which in vain shall comfort shed her healing balm, or time and pity spread the veil, that throws a shade o'er other care, for here, and here alone, profound despair 90 casts o'er the suffering soul a lasting gloom, and slowly leads her victim to the tomb. Now rude tumultuous sounds assail her ear, and soon Alfonso's victor train appear. Then, as with lingering step he moved along, 95, she saw her father mid the captive throng. She saw with dire dismay, she wildly flew, her snowy arms around his form she threw. He bleeds, she cries, I hear his moan of pain. My father will not bear the galling chain. 100. My tender father will his child forsake, his mourning child, but soon her heart will break. Cruel Alfonso, let not helpless age feel thy hard yoke, and meet thy barbarous rage. Or oh, if ever mercy moved thy soul. 105. If ever thou hast felt her blessed control, grant my sad heart's desire, and let me share the load that feeble frame but ill can bear. While the young victor, as she faltering spoke, with fixed attention, and with ardent look, 110 hung on her tender glance, that love inspires, the rage of conquest yields to milder fires. Yet, as he gazed enraptured on her form, her virtues all the heart her beauties warm, and while impassioned tones his love reveal, 115 he asks with holy rites his vows to seal. Hops thou, she cried, those sacred ties shall join this bleeding heart, this trembling hand to thine, whose ruthless heart has cowsed my pains, whose barbarous hands the blood of Zamor stains. 120. Canst thou, the murderer of my peace, control the grief that swells, the pang that rends my soul? That pang shall death alone remove, and cure the anguish of despairing love. In vain enamored youth essayed each art 125 to calm her sorrows, and to soothe her heart, while, in the range of thought, her tender breast could find no hope, on which her griefs might rest. while her soft soul, which Zamor's image fills, shrinks from the cruel author of its ills. 130 At length to madness stung by fixed disdain, the victor gives to rage the fiery rein, and bids her sorrows flow from that fond source where strong affection feels their keenest force, whose breast, when most it suffers, only heeds 135 the sharper pangs by which another bleeds. For now his cruel mandate doomed her sire stretched on the bed of torture, to expire, bound on the rack. Unmoved the victim lies, stifling in agony weak nature's sighs. 140 But oh, what form of language can impart the frantic grief that wrung Asilo's heart, when to the height of hopeless sorrow wrought, the fainting spirit feels a pang of thought, which never painted in the hues of speech. 145 Lives at the soul, and mocks expression's reach. At length she trembling cried, "The conflict's o'er. My heart, my breaking heart can bear no more. Yet spare his feeble age, my vows receive, and oh, in mercy, bid my father live." 150 Wilt them be mine? The enamored chief replies, "Yes, cruel. See, he dies, my father dies. Save, save, my father, dear, angelic maid." The charmed Alfonso cried, "Be swift obeyed. Unbind his chains, calm each anxious pain." 155 Asilo's voice no more shall plead in vain. Placed near his child, thy aged sire shall share our joys still cherished by thy tender care. "No more," she cried, "will fate that bliss allow, before my lips shall breathe the nuptial vow." 160 Some faithful guide shall lead his aged feet to distant scenes that yield a safe retreat, where some soft heart, some gentle hand, will shed the drops of comfort on his hoary head. My Zamor, if thy spirit trembles near. 165 Forgive! She seized, and poured her hopeless tear. Now night descends, and steeps each weary breast, save sad Asilo's, in the balm of rest. Her aged father's beauteous dwelling stood near the cool shelter of a waving wood. 170 But now the gales that bend its foliage die, soft on the silver turf its shadows lie, while, slowly wandering o'er the scene below, the gazing moon looked pale as silent woe. The sacred shade, amid whose fragrant bowers 175 Zamor oft soothed with song the evening hours, poured to the lunar orb, his magic lay, more mild, more pensive than her musing ray. That shade with trembling step, the mourner sought, and thus she breathed her tender, plaintive thought. 180 Ah, where, dear object of these piercing pains, where rests thy murdered form, thy loved remains? On what sad spot, my Zamor, flowed the wound that purpled with thy streaming blood the ground? Oh, had Asilo in that hour been nigh. 185 Hadst thou but fixed on me thy closing eye, told with feigned voice 'twas death's worst pang to part, and dropped thy last, cold tear upon my heart, a pang less bitter than would waste this breast, that in the grave alone shall seek its rest. 190 Soon as some friendly hand in mercy leads my aged father safe to Chile's meads, death shall forever seal the nuptial tie. The heart beloved by thee is fixed to die. She seized, when dimly through a flood of tears 195 she sees her Zamor's form, his voice she hears. "'Tis he," she cried, "he moves upon the gale. My Zamor's sigh is deep, his look is pale. I faint. His arms receive her sinking frame, he calls his love by every tender name. 200 He stays her fleeting spirit, life anew warms her cold cheek, his tears her cheek bedew. Thy Zamor lives," he cried, as on the ground I senseless lay, some child of pity bound my bleeding wounds and bore me from the plain. 205 But thou art lost, and I have lived in vain. "Forgive," she cried, in accents of despair. "Zamor, forgive thy wrongs, and oh forbear the mild reproach that fills thy mournful eye, the tear that wets thy cheek. I mean to die." 210 Could I behold my aged sire endure the pains his wretched child had power to cure? Still my father, stretched in death, I see, his grey locks trembling, as he gazed on me. My Zamor, soft, breathe not so loud a sigh. 215 Some listening foe may pitiless deny this parting hour. Hark, sure some step I hear. Zamor again is lost, for now 'tis near. She paused, when sudden from the sheltering wood a venerable form before them stood, 220. Fear not, soft maid, he cried, nor think I come to seal with deeper miseries thy doom, to bruise the breaking heart that sorrow rends. Ah, not for this lost Cassus hither bends. He comes to bid those rising sorrows cease, 225. To pour upon thy wounds the balm of peace. I robbed with dire Almagro's ruthless train, through scenes of death, to Chile's verdant plain. Their wish, to bathe that verdant plain in gore. Then from its bosom drag the golden ore, 230. But mine, to check the stream of human blood, or mingle drops of anguish with the flood. When from those fair unconquered valleys they fled, this frame was stretched upon the languid bed of pale disease, when helpless and alone, 235. The Chiles spied their friend, the murderers gone. With eager fondness round my couch they drew, and my cold hand with gushing tears bedew. By day, they soothe my pains with sweet delight, and give to watchings the chill hours of night, 240. For me their tender spirits joy to prove, the cares of pity, and the toils of love. Soon as I heard that, o'er this gentle scene, where peace and virtue mingled smile serene, the foe, like clouds that fold the tempest, hung, 245. I hither flew, my breast with anguish wrung. A Chiles band the pathless desert tracked, and softly bore me o'er its dreary waste. Then parting, at my feet they bend, and clasp these aged knees, my soul yet feels their grasp. 250. Now o'er the vale with painful step I strayed, and reached the sheltering grove, there, hapless maid. My listening ear has caught thy piercing wail, my heart has trembled to thy moving tale. And art thou he? The mournful pair exclaim, 255. How dear to misery's soul, lost Cassus' name! Spirit benign, who every grief can share, whose pity stoops to make the wretched's care. Weep not for us, in vain thy tears shall flow, for hopeless anguish, and distracting woe. 260. They ceased, in accents mild, the saint returns, yet let me soothe the pains my bosom mourns. Come, gentle sufferers, follow to yon fane, where rests Alfonso, with his victor train. My voice shall urge his soul to generous deeds, 265, and bid him hear, when truth and nature pleads. While in soft tones, lost Cassus thus expressed his pious purpose, o'er Asilo's breast a dawning ray of cheering comfort streams, but faint the hope that on her spirit beams. 270 faint, as when ebbing life must soon depart, the pulse that trembles, while it warms the heart. Before Alfonso now the lovers stand, the aged sufferer joined the mournful band, while with the look that guardian seraphs wear, 275 when sent to calm the throbs of mortal care, the story of their woes lost Cassus told, then cried, the wretched Zamor here behold! Hopst thou, fond man, a passion to control, fixed in the breast, and woven in the soul? 280. But no, mistaken youth, thy power in vain would bind thy victim in the nuptial chain. That faithful heart will rend the galling tie. That heart will break, that tender form will die. Then by each sacred name to nature dear, 285. By her strong shriek, her agonizing tear. By every horror bleeding passion knows. By the wild glance that speaks her frantic woes. By all the wasting pangs that rend her breast. By the deep groan that gives her spirit rest. 290. Let mercy's pleading voice thy bosom move, and fear to burst the bonds of plighted love. He paused, now Zamor's moan Alfonso hears, now sees the cheek of age bedewed with tears, pallid and motionless, Asilo stands, 295 fixed was her mournful eye, and clasped her hands. Her heart was chilled, her trembling heart, for their hopes slowly sinks in cold and dark despair. Alfonso's soul was emovied. No more, he cried. My hapless flame shall hearts like yours divide. 300. Live, tender spirit, soft Asilo, live! And all the wrongs of maddening rage forgive. Go from this desolated region far. These plains, where Aviar ice spreads the waste of war. Go, where pure pleasures gild the peaceful scene, 305. Go where mild virtue sheds her rays serene. In vain th enraptured maid would now impart the rising joy that swells, that pains her heart. Lost Cassa's feet in floods of tears she steeps, looks on her sire and smiles, then turns, and weeps. 310 Then smiles again, while her flushed cheek reveals the mingled tumult of delight she feels. So fall the crystal showers of fragrant spring, and o'er the pure, clear sky, soft shadows fling, then paint the drooping clouds from which they flow. 315 With the warm colors of the lucid bough. Now, o'er the barren desert, Zamor leads Asilo, and her sire, to Chile's meads. There, many a wandering wretch, condemned to roam by hard oppression, found a sheltering home. 320 Zamor to pity, tunned the vocal shell, brightening the tear of anguish, as it fell. Did e'er the human bosom throb with pain the heathen a why muse has sought to soothe in vain? She, who can still with harmony its sighs. 325 And wake the sound, at which affliction dies, can bid the stormy passions backward roll, and o'er their low-hung tempests lift the soul. With magic touch paint nature's various scene wild on the mountain, in the vale serene. 330 Can tinge the breathing rose with brighter bloom, or hang the sombrous rock in deeper gloom. Explore the gem, whose pure, reflected ray throws o'er the central cave a paler day, or soaring view the comet's fiery frame. 335 Rush o'er the sky, and fold the sphere in flame, while the charmed spirit, as her accents move, is wrapped in wonder, or dissolved in love. 338 Peru. Canto the 6th. The argument. The troops of Almagro and Alfonso meet on the plains of Cuzco. Manco Capac attacks them by night. His army is defeated, and he is forced to fly with its scattered remains. Cora goes in search of him, her infant in her arms. Overcome with fatigue, she rests at the foot of a mountain. An earthquake. A band of Indians fly to the mountains for shelter. Cora discovers her husband, their interview, her death. He escapes with his infant. Almagro claims a share of the spoils of Cuzco. His contention with Pizarro. The Spaniards destroy each other. Almagro is taken prisoner and put to death. His soldiers, in revenge, assassinate Pizarro in his palace. Las Casas dies. Gasca, a Spanish ecclesiastic, arrives in Peru, invested with great power. His virtuous conduct, the annual festival of the Peruvians, their late victories over the Spaniards in Chile, a wish for the restoration of their liberty. The poem concludes. Peru. Canto the 6th. At length Almagro, and Alfonso's train, each peril past, unite on Cusco's plain. Capac, who now beheld with anxious woe, increasing numbers of the powerful foe, resolves to pierce beneath the shroud of night 5 the hostile camp, and brave the Venraus fight. Though weak the wronged Peruvians' arrowy showers, to the dire weapons stern Iberia pours. Fierce was unequal contest, for the soul when raised by some high passion's strong control, 10 new strings the nerves, and o'er the glowing frame breathes the warm spirit of heroic flame. But from the scene where raging slaughter burns, the timid muse with pallid horror turns, the sounds of frantic woe she panting hears. 15 Where anguish dims a mother's eye with tears, or where the maid, who gave to love's soft power her faithful spirit, weeps the parting hour, and till death shall ease the tender woe, that soul must languish, and those tears must flow. 20 For never with the thrill that rapture proves shall blessed affection hail the form she loves, her eager glance no more that form shall view, her quivering lip has breathed the last adieu. Now night, that poured upon her hollow gale 25 The moan of death, withdrew her mournful veil. The sun rose lovely from the sleeping flood, and morning glittered o'er the field of blood, where bathed in gore, Peruvia's vanquished train lay cold and senseless on the sanguine plain. 30 Capac, their Genraus chief, whose ardent soul had sought the rage of battle to control, beheld with keen despair his warriors yield, and fled indignant from the conquered field. From Cusco now a wretched throng repair, 35 Who tread mid slaughtered heaps in mute despair, o'er some loved corse the shroud of earth to spread, and drop the sacred tear that suits the dead. No shriek was heard, for agony suppressed the fond complaints which eased the swelling breast. 40 Each hope forever lost, they only crave the deep repose which wraps the sheltering grave. So the meek llama, led by some decoy of man, from all his unembittered joy, erewhile, as free as roves the wandering breeze, 45 meets the hard burden on his bending knees, o'er rocks, and mountains, dark, and waste he goes, nor shuns the path where no soft herbage grows, till worn with toil, on earth he prostrate lies, heeds not the barbarous lash, but patient dies. 50 swift o'er the field of death sad Cora flew, her infant to his mother's bosom grew, she seeks her wretched lord, who fled the plain with the last remnant of his vanquished train, through the lone vale, or forest sombrest shade 55 a dreary solitude, the mourner strayed, her timid heart can now each danger dare, her drooping soul is armed by deep despair, long, long she wandered, till oppressed with toil. Her trembling footsteps track with blood the soil, 60 in vain with moans her distant lord. She calls, in vain the bitter tear of anguish falls, her moan expires along the desert wood, her tear is mingled with the crimson flood. Where o'er an ample vale a mountain rose, 65 low at its base her fainting form she throws. And here, my child, she cried, with panting breath, here let us wait the hour of lingering death. This famished bosom can no more supply the streams that nourish life, my babe must die. 70. In vain I strive to cherish for thy sake my failing strength, but when my heartstrings break, when my chilled bosom can no longer warm, my stiffening arms no more enfold thy form, soft on this bed of leaves my child shall sleep. 75. Close to his mother's corse he will not weep. Oh, weep not then, my tender babe, though near. I shall not hear thy moan, nor see thy tear. Hope not to move me by thy piercing cry, nor seek with searching look my answering eye. 80. As thus the dying Cora's plaints arose, o'er the fair valley sudden darkness throws a hideous horror. Through the wounded air howled the shrill voice of nature in despair. The birds dart screaming through the fluid sky. 85. And dashed upon the cliff's hard surface die. High o'er their rocky bounds the billows swell, then to their deep abyss affrighted fell. Earth groaning heaves with dire convulsive throes, while yawning gulfs her central caves disclose. 90. Now rushed a fright throng with trembling pace along the vale, and sought the mountain's base, purposed its perilous ascent to gain, and shunned the ruin lowering o'er the plain. They reached the spot where Cora clasped her child, 95, and gazed on present death with aspect mild. They pitying paused, she lifts her mournful eye, and views her lord, he hears his Cora's sigh, he meets her look, their melting souls unite, o'erwhelmed, and agonized with wild delight. 100. At length she faintly cried, we yet must part. Short are these rising joys, I feel my heart. My suffering heart is cold, and mists arise that shroud thy image from my closing eyes. Oh, save my child, our tender infant save. 105. And shed a tear upon thy Cora's grave. The fluttering pulse of life now ceased to play, and in his arms a pallid corse she lay. O'er her dear form he hung in speechless pain, and still on Cora called, but called in vain. 110. Scarce could his soul in one short moment bear the wild extreme of transport and despair. Now o'er the west in melting softness streams a lustre, milder than the morning beams. A purer dawn dispelled the fearful night. 115. And nature glowed in all the blooms of light. The birds awake the note that hails the day, and spread their pinions in the purple ray. A zone of gold the waves still bosom bound, and beauty shed a placid smile around. 120. Then, first awaking from his mournful trance, the wretched Capac cast an eager glance on his loved babe. Th unconscious infant smiled, and showers of softer sorrow bathed his child. The hollow voice now sounds in fancy's ear. 125. She sees the dying look, the parting tear, that sought with anxious tenderness to save that dear memorial from the closing grave. He clasps the object of his love's last care, and vows for him the load of life to bear. 130. To rear the blossom of a faded flower, and bid remembrance soothe each lingering hour. He journeyed o'er a dreary length of way, to plains where freedom shed her hallowed ray, o'er many a pathless wood and mountain hoar. 135. To that fair clime her lifeless form he bore. Ye who ne'er suffered passion's hopeless pain, deem not the toil that soothes its anguish vain. Its fondness to the mouldering corse extends, its faithful tear with the cold ashes blends. 140 perchance, the conscious spirit of the dead numbers the drops affection loves to shed. Perchance a sigh of holy pity gives to the sad bosom, where its image lives. O Nature! Sure thy sympathetic ties 145 shall o'er the ruins of the grave arise, undying spring from the relentless tomb, and shed, in scenes of love, a lasting bloom. Not long Iberia's sullied trophies wave, her guilty warriors press th untimely grave. 150 for Averis, rising from the caves of earth, wakes all her savage spirit into birth, bids proud Almagro feel her baleful flame, and Cusco's treasures from Pizarro claim. Pizarro holds the rich alluring prize. 155 with firmer grasp, the fires of discord rise. Now fierce in hostile rage, each warlike train purple with issuing gore Peruvia's plain. There, breathing hate and vengeful death they flood, and bathe their impious bands in kindred blood. 160 while pensive on each hill, whose lofty brow o'erhung with sable woods the vale below, Peruvia's hapless tribes and scattered throngs beheld the fiends of strife avenge their wrongs. Now Conquest, bending on her crimson wings, 165 her sanguine laurel to Pizarro brings, while bound, and trembling in her iron chain, Almagro swells the victor's captive train. In vain his pleading voice, his suppliant eye, conjure his conqueror, by the holy tie 170 that sealed their mutual league with sacred force, when first to climes unknown they bent their course, when danger's rising horrors lured afar, the storms of ocean, and the toils of war, the sad remains of wasted life to spare, 175 the shriveled bosom, and the silvered hair. But vainly from his lips these accents part, nor move Pizarro's cold, relentless heart, that never trembled to the sufferer's sigh or viewed the sufferer's tear with melting eye. 180 Almagro dies, the victor's savage pride to his pale corse funereal rites denied, chilled by the heavy dews of night it lay, and withered in the sultry beam of day, till Indian bosoms, touched with generous woe, 185 in the pale form forgot the tyrant foe, the last sad duties to his ashes paid, and soothed with pity's tear the overing shade. With unrelenting hate the conqueror views Almagro's band, and vengeance still pursues. 190 condemns the victims of his power to stray in drooping poverty's chill, thorny way, to pine with famine's agony severe, and all the lingering forms of death to fear, till by despair impelled, the rival train 195 rush to the haughty victor's glittering fane, swift on their foe with rage impetuous dart, and plunge their daggers in his guilty heart. How unavailing now the treasured ore that made Peruvia's rifled bosom poor! 200 he falls, no mourner near to breathe a sigh, catch the last breath, and close the languid eye, deserted, and reefs the holy tear that warm affection sheds o'er virtue's bier, denied those drops that stay the parting breath, 205 that soothe the spirit on the verge of death, though now the pale expiring form would buy with Andy's glittering mines, one faithful sigh. Now faint with virtue's toil, lost Casa's soul sought with exulting hope, her heaven a wide goal, 210 a bending angel consecrates his tears, and leads his kindred mind to purer spheres. But whence pours that stream of lambent light, that soft descending on the raptured sight, gilds the dark horrors of the raging storm. 215 it lights on earth, mild vision, gentle form, 'tis sensibility. She stands confious, with trembling step she moves, and panting breast, waved by the gentle breath of passing sighs loose in the air her robe expanded flies. 220 wet with the dew of tears her soft veil streams, and in her eye the ray of pity beams. No vivid roses her mild cheek illume, sorrow's wan touch has chased the purple bloom, yet lingering there in tender, pensive grace. 225 the softer lily fills the vacant place, and ever as her precious tears bedew its modest flowers, they shed a paler hue. To yon deserted grave, low swift she flies where her loved victim, mild lost Casas lies. 230 light on the hallowed turf I see her stand, and slowly wave in air her snowy wand. I see her deck the solitary haunt, with chaplets twinned from every weeping plant. Its odors mild the simple sixlet shed. 235 the shrinking lily hung its drooping head, a moaning zephyr sight within the bower, and bent the yielding stem of every flower. Hither, she cried, Her melting tone I hear. It vibrates full on fancy's raptured ear. 240. Ye gentle spirits whom my soul refines, where all its animating luster shines. Ye who can exquisitely feel the glow, whose soft suffusion gilds the cloud of woe. Warm as the colors varying iris pours. 245. That tinge with streaming raised the chilling showers. Ye to whose yielding hearts my power endears, the transport blended with delicious tears. The bliss that swells to agony the breast, the sympathy that robs the soul of rest. 250. Hither with fond devotion pensive come, kiss the pale shrine, and murmur o'er the tomb. Bend on the hallowed turf the tearful eye, and breathe the precious incense of a sigh. Lost causeless tear has moistened misery's grave. 255. His sigh has moaned the wretched failed to save. He, while conflicting pangs his bosom tear, has sought the lonely cavern of despair, where desolate she fled, and poured her thought, to the dread verge of wild distraction wrought. 260. White drops of mercy bathed his hoary cheek, he poured by heaven and spurred its accents meek. In truth's clear mirror bade the mourner's view pierce the deep veil which darkling error drew, and vanquished empire with a smile resign. 265. While brighter worlds in fair perspective shine, she paused, yet still the sweet enthusiast bends o'er the cold turf, and still her tear descends, the ever-falling tears her beauties shroud, till slow she vanished in a fleecy cloud. 270. Mild Gasca now, the messenger of peace, suspends the storm, and bids the tumult cease. Pure spirit, in religion's garb he came, and all his bosom felt her holy flame. 'Twas then her view tear eyes glory, and their care. 275. To bid oppression's harpy talons spare, to bend the crimson banner he unfurled, and shelter from his grasp a suffering world. Gasca, the guardian minister of woe, bids o'er her wounds the balms of comfort flow. 280. While rich poesy, rolls the copious tide of wealth, unbounded as the wish of pride, his pure, unsullied soul with high disdain for virtue spurns the fascinating bane. Her seraph form can still his breast allure. 285. Though drayest in weeds, she triumphed to be poor, hopeless ambition's murders to restrain, and virtue's wrongs, he sought Iberia's plain. Without one mean reserve he nobly brings a massive treasure, yet unknown to kings. 290. No purple pomp around his dome was spread, no gilded roofs hung glittering o'er his head, yet peace with milder radiance decked his bower, and crowned with dearer joy life's evening hour, while virtue whispered to his conscious heart. 295. The sweet reflection of its high desert. Ah, meek Peruvia, still thy murmured sighs, thy stifled groans in fancy's ear arise. Saddening she views thy desolated soul, as slow the circling years of bondage roll. 300. Redeem from tyranny's oppressive power with fond affection's force one sacred hour, and consecrate its fleeting, precious space, the dear remembrance of the past to trace. Call from her bed of dust joy's buried shade. 305. She smiles in memory's lucid robes arrayed, o'er thy creative scene, see, majestic moves, and wakes each mild delight thy fancy loves. But soon the image of thy wrongs enclouds the fair and transient ray of pleasure's shrouds. 310. Far other visions melt thy mournful eye, and wake the gushing tear, indignant sigh. There Adeliba's sacred, murdered form sinks in the billow of oppression's storm. Wild o'er the scene of death thy glances roll. 315. And pangs tumultuous swell thy troubled soul. Thy bosom burns. Distraction spreads her flames, and from the tyrant foe her victim claims. But lo! Where bursting desolation's night, a sudden ray of glory cheers my sight. 320. From my fond eye the tear of rapture flows, my heart with pure delight exulting glows. A blooming chief of India's royal race, whose soaring soul its high descent can trace, the flag of freedom rears on Chile's plain. 325. And leads to glorious strife his generous train, and see Iberia bleeds, while victory twines her fairest blossoms round Peruvia's shrines. The gaping wounds of earth disclose no more the lucid silver, and the glowing ore. 330. A brighter glory gilds the passing hour, while freedom breaks the rod of lawless power. Low on the Andes' icy steep she glows, and prints with rapid step eternal snows, or moves majestic o'er the desert plain. 335 And eloquently pours her potent strain. Still may that strain the patriot's soul inspire, and still this injured race her spirit fire. O freedom, may thy genius still ascend, beneath thy crest may proud Iberia bend. 340 While rolled in dust thy graceful feet beneath, fades the dark laurel of her sanguine wreath. Bend her red trophies, tear her victor plume, and close insatiate slaughter's yawning tomb. Again on soft Peruvia's fragrant breast 345 May beauty blossom, and may pleasure rest. Peru, the muse that vainly mourned thy woes, whom pity robbed so long of dear repose, the muse, whose pensive soul with anguish wrung her early lyre for thee has trembling strung. 350 Shed the weak tear, and breath the powerless sigh, which soon in cold oblivion's shade must die, pants with the wish thy deeds may rise to fame, bright on some living harp's immortal frame. While on the string of ecstasy, it pours 355 Thy future triumphs o'er unnumbered shores. The llamas bend their knees and stoop their body in such a manner as not to discompose their burden. They move with a slow but firm pace, in countries that are impracticable to other animals. They are either dispirited by fasting nor drudgery, while they have any strength remaining. But, when they are totally exhausted, or fall under their burden, it is to no purpose to harass and beat them. They will continue striking their heads on the ground, first on one side, then on the other, till they kill themselves. Aubé Reynolds' History of the European Settlements. See a delightful representation of the incorruptible integrity of this Spaniard in Robertson's History of America. C. O'er thy creative scene, the Peruvians have solemn days on which they assume their antient dress. Some among them represent a tragedy, the subject of which is the death of Atabalpa. The audience, who begin with shedding tears, are afterwards transported into a kind of madness. It seldom happens in these festivals, but that some Spaniard is slain. Aubé Reynolds' History. D. On Chile's plain. An Indian descended from the Incas has lately obtained several victories over the Spaniards. The gold mines have been for some time shut up, and there is much reason to hope that these injured nations may recover the liberty of which they have been so cruelly deprived. Sonnet. To Mrs. Siddons. Siddons. The Muse, for many a joy refined, feelings which ever seem too swiftly fled, for those delicious tears she loves to shed, around thy brow the wreath of praise would bind, but can her feeble notes thy praise unfold? Repeat the tones each changing passion gives, or mark where nature in thy action lives, where, in thy pause, she speaks a pang untold. When fierce ambition steals thy daring breast, when from thy frantic look our glance recedes, or, O divine enthusiast, when oppressed by anxious love, that eye of softness pleads, the sunbeam all can feel, but who can trace the instant light, and catch the radiant grace? Queen Mary's Complaint. I. Pale moon! Thy mild benignant light may glad some other captive's sight, brightening the gloomy objects nigh, thy beams a lenient thought supply. But, O pale moon! What ray of thine can soothe a misery like mine? Chase the sad image of the past, and woes forever doomed to last. 2. Where are the years with pleasure gay? How bright their course! How short their stay! Where are the crowns, that round my head a double glory vainly spread? Where are the beauties wont to move, the grace, converting aught to love? Alas, had fate designed to bless, its equal hand had given me less. 3. Why did the regal garb array a breast that tender passions sway? A soul of unsuspicious frame, which leans with faith on friendship's name, ye vanished hopes, ye broken ties. By perfidy in friendship's guise, this breast was injured, lost, betrayed. Where shall Mary look for aid? 4. How could I hope redress to find stern rival? From thy envious mind? How could I ere thy words believe? O ever practice to deceive! Thy wiles abhorred shall please alone cold bosoms, selfish as thy own, while ages hence, indignant, hear the horrors of my fate severe. V. Have not thy unrelenting hands torn nature's most endearing bands? Whatever I hopped from woman's name, the ties of blood, the stranger's claim, a sister queen's despairing breast on thee securely leaned for rest, on thee. from whom that breast has bled with sharper ills than those I fled. 6. O, skilled in every baser art, tyrant! To this unguarded heart no guilt so black as thine belongs, which loads my lengthening years with wrongs. Strike then at once, insatiate foe, the long, premeditated blow, so shall thy jealous terror cease, and Mary's harassed soul have peace. Ophelia, an elegy. As roamed a pilgrim o'er the mountain drear, on whose lone verge the foaming billows roar, the wail of hopeless sorrow pierced his ear, and swelled at distance on the sounding shore. The mourner breathed her deep complaint to night, her moan she mingled with the rapid blast, that barred her bosom in its wasting flight, and o'er the earth her scattered tresses cast. Ye winds, she cried, still heave the labyrinth deep, the mountains shake, the howling forests rend. Still dash the shivering fragment from the steep, nor for a wretch like me the storms suspend. Ah, wherefore wish the rising storm to spare? Ah, why implore the raging winds to save? What refuge can the breast where lives despair desire but death? What shelter but the grave? To me congenial is the gloom of night, the savage howlings that infest the air. I unappalled can view the fatal light that flashes from the pointed lightning's glare. And yet erewhile, if night her shadows threw o'er the known woodlands of my native vale, fancy and visions wild the landscape drew, and swelled with boding sounds the whispering gale. But deep despair has armed my timid soul, and agony has numbed the throb of fear, taught a weak heart its terrors to control, and more to court than shun the danger near. Yet could I welcome the return of light, its glimmering beam might guide my searching eye. The sacred spot might then emerge from night, on which a lover's bleeding relics lie. For sure 'twas here, as late a shepherd strayed, bewildered, o'er the mountain's dreary bound. Close to the pointed cliff he saw him laid, where heaved the waters of the deep around. Alas, no longer could his heart endure the woes that heart was doomed for me to prove. He sought for death the only cure that fate can give to vain and hopeless love. My sire, unjust, while passion swelled his breast, from the loved Alfred his Ophelia tore, mocked the keen sorrows that my soul oppressed, and vainly bade me love no more. He told me love was like yon troubled deep, whose restless billows never know repose, are wildly dashed upon the rocky steep, and tremble to the lightest breeze that blows. From these rude storms remote, her gentle balm, dear to the suffering spirit, peace supplies. Peace, 'tis th' oblivious lake's detested calm, whose dull, slow waters never fall or rise. Ah, what avails a parent's stern command? The force of conquering passion to subdue? And wherefore seek to rend, with cruel hand, the ties enchanted love so fondly drew? Yet I could see my Alfred's fixed despair, and awed by filial fear conceal my woes. My coward heart could separation bear, and check the struggling anguish as it rose. 'Twas guilt the barbarous mandate to obey, which bade no parting sigh my bosom move. Victim of duty's unrelenting sway, I seemed a traitor, while a slave to love. Let her, who sealed a lover's fate, endure the sharpest pressure of deserved distress. 'Twere added perfidy to seek a cure, and stained with falsehood, wished to suffer less. For wretches doomed in other griefs to pine, oft will benignant hope her ray impart, and pity oft from her celestial shrine drop a warm tear upon the fainting heart. But o'er the lasting gloom of love's despair, can hope's bright ray its cheering visions shed? Can pity soothe the woes that breast must bear, which vainly loves, and vainly mourns the dead? No! Lingering still, and still prolonged, the moan shall never pause, till heaves my latest breath, till memory's distracting pang is flown, and all my sorrows shall be hushed in death. And death is pitying come, whose hand shall tear from this afflicted heart the sense of pain. My fainting limbs refuse their load to bear, and life no longer will my form sustain. Yet once did health's enlivening glow adorn, and pleasure shed from me her loveliest ray, pure as the gentle star that gilds the morn, and constant as the equal light of day. Now those lost pleasures tracked by memory seem like yon elusive meteor's glancing light, that o'er the darkness threw its instant gleam, then sunk, and vanished in the depth of night. My native vale! And now delightful bower! Scenes to my hopeless love forever dear. Sweet vale, for whom the morning whacked her flower, gay bower, for whom the evening poured her tear. I ask no more to see your beauties rise, ye rocks and mountains, on whose rugged breast my Alfred, murdered by Ophelia, lies. In your deep solitude so let me rest. And sure the dawning ray that lights the steep, and slowly wanders o'er the purple wave, will shew me where his sacred relics sleep, will lead his mourner to her destined grave. O'er the high precipice unmoved she bent, a fearful path the beams of morning shew. The pilgrim reached with toil the rude ascent, and saw her brooding o'er the deep below. Ophelia, stay! He cried, thy Alfred calls. Oh, stay, my love! In sorrow yet more dear. I come! In vain the soothing accent falls, alas, it reached not her distracted ear. Ah, what avails, she said, that morning rose? With fruitless pain I seek his mouldering clay. Vain search! To fill the measure of my woes, the foaming surge has washed his course away. This cruel agony why longer bear? Death, death alone can all my pangs remove. Kind death will banish from my heart despair. And when I live again, I live to love. She said, and plunged into the awful deep. He saw her meet the fury of the wave, he frantic saw, and darting to the steep with desperate anguish, sought her watery grave. He clasped her dying form, he shard her sighs, he checked the billow rushing on her breast. She felt his dear embrace. Her closing eyes were fixed on Alfred, and her death was blessed. Sonnet. To expression. Expression, child of soul! I fondly trace thy strong enchantments, when the poet's lyre, the painter's pencil catch thy sacred fire, and beauty wakes for thee her touching grace. But from this fright glance thy form avert when horrors check thy tear, thy struggling sigh, when frenzy rolls in thy impassioned eye, or guilt sits heavy on thy laboring heart, nor ever let my shuddering fancy bear the wasting groan, or view the pallid look of him, the Muses loved. When hope forsook his spirit, vainly to the Muses dear, for charmed with even a wise song, this bleeding breast mourns the blessed power of verse could give despair no rest. A. Chatterton. The End. End of Project Gutenberg's Poems, 1786, Volume I, by Helen Maria Williams.